Hey guys. Tonight, we dive headfirst into the battles that cracked continents and shook empires' decisive moments that didn't just shape the outcome of World War II, but quite literally redrew the map of the modern world. You're standing under a gray September sky. Boots squelching through the mud of the Polish countryside. And the air smells of gunpowder and damp hay. Bombers scream overhead. Sirens wail in cities behind you. And here's the kicker. You're probably not going to survive this. But hey, no one did war because it was relaxing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing who's out there, riding shotgun on these sleepy night marches with me. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward through the fields of Poland in early September, 1939. The clouds are thick and low. The earth still warm from summer. And the horses tethered to battered wagons look more exhausted than you feel. You're part of a small Polish infantry unit. The uniforms are mismatched. The rifles pre-Great War. And the mood sits somewhere between grim resignation and stubborn defiance. To the west, the Wehrmacht has begun its horrifying ballet of shock and speed. And you're already behind. The Germans don't just invade Poland. They unleash an entirely new kind of warfare blitzkrieg. The Lightning War. Its tanks slicing through the countryside like hot knives through butter. Infantry sprinting behind them. And dive bombers, those dreaded Stukas, screaming downward in synchronized destruction. The idea is brutal in its simplicity. Don't give the enemy time to breathe, let alone regroup. And it's working. Poland's defenses, brave but underprepared, crumble within days. The High Command had hoped for a long war of attrition. But what they're getting is a surgical dismantling of everything they planned for. You hear stories from comrades, tanks rolling over trenches before they're finished being dug, roads choked with fleeing civilians, entire regiments erased from the map in hours. One man claims to have seen a German column advancing while still cooking their breakfast. That's how little resistance they expected. But the Germans aren't the only threat. On the 17th of September, just over 2 weeks after Germany's invasion, the Soviet Union strolls into Poland from the east. Calm, as you please. Like someone arriving late to a feast, they didn't help prepare, but intend to devour anyway. It's the kind of political backstab that makes your blood boil, your odds of survival plummet. Stalin and Hitler had signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in secret, carving Poland up like pie behind closed doors. Historians still argue whether Stalin ever intended to honor it, or whether it was just another step in the long dance of mutual betrayal that defined the early war. By the end of September, Warsaw is besieged. The once grand city now looks like someone stomped it repeatedly and then set it on fire for good measure. You catch glimpses of it in newspapers if you're lucky enough to find one still printing. Shells burst over church steeples. Whole blocks vanish in clouds of brick dust. And civilians climb from rubble like ghosts, clutching one another, dazed but upright. You pass through a small village on foothouses charred, pigs rooting through broken crates, a lone bicycle tire spinning gently from a clothesline. A child offers you a piece of stale bread, not because she has any to spare, but because she has no other way to say thank you. You tip your cap and move on. It's all you can do. Despite the overwhelming odds, Polish soldiers fight tooth and nail. They delay. They sabotage. They harass supply lines. One cavalry unit famously charges a German tank column. Yes, with horses. The story gets twisted later. Some say it was a suicidal act of honor. Others claim it never happened quite that way. Historians still debate the exact details. But the essence is clear. It was defiance. Plain and painful. By early October, the last Polish army unit surrenders. The country is divided between Germany and the USSR. On paper, Poland has fallen, but in spirit, not even close, because what the invaders don't expect is the stubborn undercurrent of resistance that's already bubbling beneath the surface. You hear about something called the Związek Walki Zbrojnej, or Union of Armed Struggle, a precursor to the Home Army. You hear whispers of sabotage, of secret schools, of underground presses churning out forbidden newspapers in candlelit cellars. One man swears he saw an entire train rerouted by partisans and blown off the tracks near Lublin. You don't know if it's true, but you desperately want it to be. You're not just watching a country fall. You're watching a country refuse to stay fallen. In the months to come, Poland becomes a ghost state. Its government in exile. Its people brutalized. But its spirit alive and clawing beneath the surface. Kids smuggle food under their coats. Priests hide radios in their sacristies. Elderly women memorize messages and deliver them word for word across city blocks like human telegraphs. The Germans roll in with their boots and banners. But Poland becomes an open wound they can't cauterize. And you're swept into the underground. You deliver notes. You steal documents. You run messages tucked inside loaves of bread. The streets are cold, and your boots are worse. But your eyes are sharp, and your soul is full of fire. That's the real story of the first, decisive battle of the war, not just that Poland fell fast, but that it refused to stay down. It becomes a symbol to the rest of Europe. Resist. Even when the whole world seems to be on fire. Even when you're outgunned, outflanked, and out of time, so you slip into the shadows, clutching your orders tight. Boots silent on the cobblestones. Because even when the first battles are lost, the war is still young, and Poland is still watching. You're hunched behind a crumbling stone wall, eyes fixed on the river. Muse as the sun beats down hard enough to bake your helmet. It's May 1940. And you're in the wrong place, at the worst possible time. Sedan? The birds have stopped singing. The French artillery's gone eerily quiet. And you've got that sharp pit of your stomach feeling that today is going to be the kind of day that gets mentioned in history books, just not in the way you'd like. The Germans are coming. Again. But this time, they're doing something no one thought they would. Instead of repeating the slow grind of World War I, trench to trench, muddy yard by muddy yard, they're slipping through the Ardennes forest. Adense. The hilly terrain everyone thought was too difficult for tanks, including, regrettably, your own commanders. Historians still argue whether the French High Command underestimated the Germans' speed, or if they just couldn't imagine lightning striking in the same place twice but faster. You hear it before you see it. A deep, rattling hum that grows into a mechanical roar. Panzers. Sleek, armored beasts, kicking up trails of dust and ambition, rolling fast and low, like they're late for a very aggressive appointment. Above them, dive bombers scream down from the clouds, dropping their payloads with pinpoint accuracy. The wall you're behind shudders. A chunk breaks loose, and you hit the dirt with all the grace of a sack of onions. The German troops swarm across the Meuse River using hastily assembled pontoon bridges, which your side tries to shell, but mostly just misses. They cross under cover of Luftwaffe bombardment, making the sky look like an angry thunder god with budget to spare. Incredibly, the French defenses along this sector are light too light. The French command had placed their best troops and fortifications in the north, expecting a repeat of the Schlieffen Plan. Instead, you're here with what feels like a museum exhibit's worth of equipment and instructions written by people who've never seen a map. The Germans punch through the French 55th Infantry Division at Sedan like they're opening a tin can. Panic spreads faster than orders. You hear screams over the radio. See officers staring blankly at field maps. And you realize nobody knows what to do next. Back in Paris, the French government is thrown into chaos. They'd built the Maginot Linea, massive string of defensive fortresses along the Franco-German border. Imposing, expensive, and entirely useless against tanks that didn't bother knocking. The Germans simply sidestepped it by charging through Belgium and Luxembourg. As you watch the first German wave disappear into the countryside beyond, you think about the irony. All that concrete, and it never saw a shot fired in anger. The breakthrough at Sedan turns into a flood. The panzers spill west, then north, cutting off the Allied forces advancing into Belgium. British and French troops are suddenly caught in a giant pocket near the coast. Dunkirk looms in the near future. Though you don't know it yet. What you do know is that nothing about this feels like the orderly warfare of old. By May 14, the French lines around Sedan are collapsing. You and your unit retreat through thick woods, across scorched fields, and into towns already abandoned by everyone but pigeons and shattered glass. You pass a bakery with warm loaves still cooling on the windowsill. Someone takes one, then leaves a few coins behind. Because even in chaos, manner persists. Everywhere, the roads are jammed civilian cars loaded with mattresses, bicycles strapped to carts, refugees clutching children and chickens. One woman yells at a German plane overhead with a broom. You salute her as you pass. The weirdest part? The German soldiers you encounter don't look like monsters. They look tired. They look 20. You share a foxhole with a corporal who later tells you he ran into a group of French soldiers who surrendered without a fight, only to be offered cigarettes by their captors. War makes enemies of people who probably would have enjoyed the same jazz records. France tries to rally. Generals argue over counterattacks. Reserve units are rushed to the front, but the Germans are already too deep, too fast, and their radio coordination? Terrifying. It's like they're all on the same page. While your side is flipping through the wrong manual in 3 different languages, on May 15, German General Heinz Guderian's panzer divisions break through and dash toward the English Channel. He pushes further than his orders allow, taking a gamble that pays off in spades. Guderian's aggressive tactics become the stuff of legend, and some French commanders describe his approach as ghostly, appearing in places no one thought possible. Historians still argue whether High Command's hesitation sealed France's fate, or whether the Blitz was just that unstoppable. You fall back again, this time toward Rethel. Then Leon. You sleep in barns, in ditches, under trucks. Your boots wear through. Your rations turn to crumbs. You start measuring time in kilometers of retreat and the number of tanks you see per hour. Spoiler: too many. The fall of Sedan cracks open the French war effort. The government starts discussing evacuation. By June, they'll abandon Paris without firing a shot in its defense. You remember seeing posters just weeks ago claiming France was ready, that its army was the most modern in Europe. You feel the crushing weight of how wrong that was. The speed of the German advance is so shocking that British Prime Minister Winston Churchill describes it as a colossal military disaster. And he's right. Over the coming weeks, hundreds of thousands of Allied troops will be forced to evacuate from Dunkirk in a daring and chaotic rescue, back at the broken wall near Sedan, where it all started. The fields are quiet again. The birds return. Cautiously, the panzers are long gone, already carving new roads westward. You stare at the blackened remains of your shelter and wonder what it means to lose this fast. Not just battles. But entière stratégie. The confidence of a nation. The illusion of preparedness. France hasn't just cracked. It's splintered into something else entirely, and the war has only just begun. You're looking up again. The clouds are low and restless, tinged gray with soot and something far worse, dread. It's the summer of 1940, and you're stationed somewhere south of London. Though stationed makes it sound a bit more glamorous than it is. You're really just crouched behind a sandbag wall, helmet crooked, trying to keep your tea from spilling every time a Messerschmitt dives overhead like it owns the place. Because in this moment, it kind of does. The Battle of Britain isn't a battle like Sedan or Stalingrad. There are no trenches, no lines drawn in dirt, no tanks grinding through wheat fields. This one takes place in the sky, which is really inconvenient. Because you can't reach the sky. You just have to watch it, pray to it, and hope it doesn't kill you today. It begins as a campaign of attrition. Hitler's aim is simple: soften Britain enough from the air so that an invasion Operation Sea Lion will feel more like a mop-up than a battle. First, the Luftwaffe targets coastal defenses and shipping. Then, radar stations and airfields. Then, when the RAF proves too annoyingly resilient, they shift to bombing cities, especially London. Historians still debate whether this was a strategic blunder by Goering or an emotional overreaction by Hitler himself. Either way, it gives you just enough of an opening to survive. You trudge down the runway of a makeshift RAF airbase as a pair of Hawker Hurricanes rumble overhead. The tarmac is a patchwork of steel mats and hope. Planes land with wheels barely holding together. Wings scraped. Paint scorched. Pilots climb out pale. Smoke-stained. Coughing. Some don't climb out at all. You help drag the wreckage off to the side. No time for mourning. If the engine still turns, it might fly again. And that's what you need: machines that fly. Bodies that can get back in them. And courage stitched together with chewing gum and RAF rations. Most of the RAF pilots are barely older than you. Some much younger. They sleep in hangars, eat out of dented tins, and fly 2, 3, sometimes 4 sorties a day. You hear them joke about it. One pilot, ginger-haired, and always slightly singed. Names his plane, the Widowmaker, just to mess with the new recruits. The Luftwaffe outnumbers you, outguns you, outproduces you. And yet, they never quite outfly you. The RAF's secret weapon isn't in the sky, it's on the ground. Radar. This blinking, humming, unglamorous network of towers and operators can spot incoming planes while they're still over the channel. It allows the RAF to scramble fighters at the last possible moment, saving precious fuel and reducing losses. The Germans, thinking the British must be clairvoyant, start bombing radar stations early on, but they never finish the job. Historians still argue whether that oversight was fatal to Germany's plans. You're rotated up to the observation post near Dover. It's windy and smells like salt and fear. You peer through binoculars all day, counting formations, scribbling notes. They come in waves junkers, Heinkuts, Messerschmitts, sometimes in tight formation, sometimes loose, like a fist that's already opened. When they hit London, it's a new kind of hell. Not a single air raid, but a season of them, the Blitz. From the 7th of September onward, the bombs fall nightly for 57 days straight. You sleep in basements, subway tunnels, under tables. Children clutch gas, masks like teddy bears. One girl names hers Bubbles. She wears it like a bonnet, laughs through the eye holes. Your job shifts again this time to delivering messages across the city. The streets are shattered. Entire blocks turn to rubble. You see an old man sweeping debris from the steps of a house that no longer has walls. He nods at you and says, "Still got me stoop." Don't I? Fire brigades move like ghosts, hoses trailing behind, faces streaked with ash. You help one night after a factory takes a direct hit. The smoke is so thick you can taste it. Something bitter, metallic. You don't ask what's burning. You just pass buckets. Despite the nightly terror, the British people develop an almost infuriatingly cheerful resilience. They call unexploded bombs duds and pretend they're lucky charms. They sing in the shelters, boil tea over candle flames, and write sarcastic notes on buildings that now open directly onto rubble piles. Gone to lunch. Back never. The pilots, the famed few, Churchill, later Lion Zezdo the impossible. They shoot down enough Luftwaffe planes to turn the tide. On good days, you hear cheers in the streets. On bad days, you hear nothing at all. Silence feels heavier than noise. Your friend George, who swears he once flirted with a duchess while covered in soot flies, his 6th sortie in a single day and doesn't come back. His bunk stays made for a week. Then someone else moves in. That's how it works here. No time to grieve when the sky is still falling. The turning point arrives not with a bang, but with a slow lessening. The raids don't stop, but they become less frequent. German losses are unsustainable. Hitler quietly shelves Operation Sea Lion. He'll turn his eyes east soon, toward the Soviet Union. But for now, Britain remains unconquered. You sit on a bench in Hyde Park one gray afternoon and realize something rare and strange. You've survived. Not just physically, but psychologically. You've stared at the heavens night after night and watched them rain fire. And yet, you're still here. Tea still brews. The buses still run. Someone's playing a violin on the corner. Badly, but it's music, nonetheless. One night, you walk past a bakery whose windows are shattered. But inside, the baker is back at it, rolling dough under a single gas lamp. You ask him why. He shrugs. Bombs or not, people still need bread. Don't they? You smile, all the way back to your bunk. Because somehow, despite everything, life refuses to quit, and so does Britain. You exhale, and it fogs in front of your face cloudy. Sharp, like breath turned ghost. Snow crunches under your boots as you trudge through the frozen mud just outside Moscow. The wind doesn't whistle here. It bites. Sharp, mean, unforgiving. It cuts through your coat like it's not even there, and settles in your bones like a tenant who doesn't plan on leaving. Welcome to the Eastern Front in winter. You are very much not dressed for this. It's December 1941. Hitler's Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union, is supposed to have wrapped up by now. Berlin expected a quick campaign. Over in months, Russia broken like a brittle thing beneath the heels of the Wehrmacht. But someone forgot to tell the Russians to cooperate. Or the weather. For that matter, you're standing just miles from Moscow. In terrain, so flat it feels like the edge of the world. The German advance has stalled. The tanks are stuck. Engines fail. Gunsiam. Soldiers freeze where they sleep. Some still sitting upright. Icicles in their nostrils. And you? You're pulling double duty digging trenches during the day and hauling the wounded at night. You haven't eaten a hot meal in 4 days. And if you find one more frozen potato, you'll name it and start talking to it. The Germans had come fast. Blitzkrieg again. Hundreds of divisions. Thousands of tanks. Millions of soldiers. They drove deep into Soviet territory in record time. But by the time they reached the outskirts of Moscow, the heat had vanished, and the roads had turned to frozen stone. You pass one panzer, sitting abandoned. Its treads snapped, and its commander still inside. One gloved hand on the radio. His last transmission, they say, was, "We can see the spires." But the spires stayed out of reach. The Soviet defense of Moscow was ferocious. Entire divisions pulled from Siberia hardened. Trained for this exact kind of cold arrived just in time. Historians still debate whether Stalin already had those troops in place or whether Japan's inactivity in the East freed them up last minute. Either way, they show up like ghosts wrapped in white. You see them move through the woods like shadows. Rifles, slung. Eyes unblinking. You've never been more relieved to be on the same side as someone. They bring skis. Camouflage. Cold weather gear that actually works. And they bring heat metaphorical. Of course, the kind that turns retreat into rally. Within days, the counteroffensive begins. You're shocked. Everyone's shocked. You expected to dig in and die slowly. Instead, you're given a battered Mosin Nagant rifle and told to advance. You don't feel ready. But you go. Your fingers are numb as you pull the bolt back. Your legs are rubber. But beside you, soldiers shout the old war cries, "Za Rodinu, Za Stalina," and somehow, you move. Across snowy fields, through bombed-out villages, past the skeletons of German supply trucks frozen in place like war's forgotten toys. The Red Army hits the Germans' hard shock assaults at dawn. Ski-mounted raids through forest trails. Ambushes in blizzards so thick you can't see your own boots. You're told to aim for the white coats. The irony isn't lost on you. You're all wearing white coats now, in Moscow itself. The streets are filled with sandbags, tank traps, civilians digging trenches. There's a monument wrapped in camouflage netting, and a soldier guarding it. Rifle across his lap like a sleeping dog. You pause beside him. He offers you a cigarette without saying a word. The city becomes both fortress and symbol. One man you meet skin like parchment, eyes sharp as razor tells you. If Moscow falls, everything falls. Then he goes back to wiring explosives to a railway bridge. But Moscow doesn't fall. Instead, on the 5th of December, 1941, the Red Army launches a massive counteroffensive. The Germans, ill-equipped and overextended, begin to falter. You watch as panzer divisions try to maneuver on ice-glazed roads and slide into ditches. The Luftwaffe can barely get airborne. German soldiers trade watches for fur hats. Their winter uniforms, meant for a shorter war, are jokes compared to yours. A Soviet tank crew you ride with one night laughs bitterly at the idea of German supremacy. One guy opens a can of what he claims is pork. It smells like varnish. He eats it anyway. Your unit pushes westward, taking back ground foot by frozen foot. Every mile is earned in blood and ice. You pass abandoned foxholes littered with German letters, half-burned photographs, one chessboard carved into the dirt. The pieces are gone, probably eaten. Maybe the board was too. Frostbite claims more lives than bullets. You wrap your toes in newspaper and hope it's enough. You'd kill for a pair of mittens. Someone trades a tin of sardines for one leather glove. He wears it on his dominant hand like it's armor. In the middle of a whiteout blizzard, your group captures a ridge that overlooks a stretch of the Moscow highway. Through the snow, you see headlights, flicker vehicles heading west, German trucks, retreating. That's when it hits you. You've stopped them. Moscow stands. The Nazi war machine, undefeated until now, has finally been blunted. Stalin orders a celebration. Even as the shells continue to fall, you don't celebrate. You sleep sitting up, forehead against your rifle, snow melting in your lap. But inside you, something stirs, something defiant. You might survive this after all. Later, when the ground begins to thaw in spring, you'll see what the winter really did. The dead still sitting where they froze. A line of tanks half submerged in melted ice. Fields scarred and churned and quiet again. You'll plant your boots in that soil and wonder if it remembers every footstep, every scream, every moment of frozen defiance. Moscow becomes a turning point, not just strategically, but psychologically. The myth of German invincibility shatters. For the first time, the world sees the Nazis pushed back, not contained, not resisted, defeated. And though the war is far from over, this moment, this icy, shivering stand beneath the spires of Moscow, this is where the tide begins to turn. You don't hear it. First, you feel it. A tremor in the ground. A weird ripple in your spine. And the kind of sensation that says something just shifted in the world. But it'll take your ears a moment to catch up. Then the sound comes. Distinct at first. A strange, high-pitched whine growing into a gut-punching boom that slams into your chest like a freight train. The entire harbor shakes. You drop the wrench you've been holding. It hits the deck of the USS Oklahoma with a clatter that no one notices, because everything is already chaos. It's the 7th of December. 1941. And you're at Pearl Harbor. The sky, seconds ago, blue and lazy with gulls, is now full of shrieking metal. Planes dive out of the clouds like birds of prey, only they aren't yours. They bear the red rising sun insignia of Japan. And they're dropping torpedoes into the harbor like they're seeding a field. One hits the Arizona. And suddenly, the entire battleship lifts from the water, as if some monstrous hand tried to snatch it from the sea, then drops it in pieces. Fireballs erupt. Black smoke spirals up like columns from a broken temple. You duck instinctively, even though there's nowhere to hide. Sirens scream. People scream. Someone yells, "They're bombing us," as if that wasn't already incredibly obvious. The attack lasts less than 2 hours, but it feels like a lifetime. Battleships sink. Sailors dive into burning oil-slicked water. Bullets chew through the air like angry wasps. You see a cook from the mess hall drag 2 men out of a flooded corridor, his apron still tied around his waist. Another guy throws potatoes at a plane because it's all he has. Historians still argue whether the element of surprise alone made the attack so effective, or if American intelligence had simply failed to put the pieces together in time. By the time it's over, more than 400 Americans are dead. 18 ships are damaged or destroyed. And the illusion of invulnerability, the idea that the war was an ocean away, sinks to the bottom of the harbor with the twisted hulls of the Pacific Fleet. You help carry bodies out of the water. Some, you know. Most you don't. You're handed a mop. Then a stretcher. Then a clipboard to list the missing. You stop reading the names after the first page. Your hands are shaking too badly. That night, fires still burn across the harbor. The smell of smoke clings to your skin no matter how many times you scrub. The water glows with oil and sorrow. Above it all, the stars blink calmly, as if nothing's changed. But everything has. The next morning, the base is still, quiet, shell-shocked. Then a radio broadcast crackles through. President Franklin D. Roosevelt has addressed Congress. He calls the 7th of December a date which will live in infamy. Within hours, the United States declares war on Japan. You hear cheers from some of the guys. You hear silence from others. One sailor mutters, "About time." Another just shakes his head and lights a cigarette with hands that won't stop trembling. War has arrived in America not as headlines, not as distant thunder, but as fire in your backyard. And everything is about to change. Soon, you're on a transport heading west across the Pacific. You pass the time tying knots, cleaning your gear, listening to stories you've already heard a dozen times. One guy says he saw a Japanese pilot wave at him during the attack. Another claims he shot down a plane with a Sishawu. No one believes him. But you let him have it. He needs the win. As you land on a small island refueling base, you see engineers unloading crates, labeled with stenciled codes. Inside, you learn later, are the pieces of America's industrial answer to Pearl Harbor. Tanks, planes, ammunition, enough to flood the Pacific. You're part of the answer now. And you're not alone. Factories back home are already working around the clock. Detroit's car plants now churn out bombers. Housewives weld armor plates. Teenagers lie about their age to join up. And every radio seems to end its news segments with one word: victory. You train endlessly jungle drills, amphibious landings, weapons cleaning in monsoons, so heavy you can't see your boots. The Pacific is a hot, humid nightmare, with bugs the size of playing cards and heat that makes your uniform feel like a slow-cooking punishment. But every hour is fueled by the memory of burning ships and floating comrades. You scrawl letters home when you can. We're doing fine. You lie. The food's not bad. You lie again. Your mom sends back cookies, but they arrive as crumbs soaked in humidity. Still, you eat every one. Months later, you stand on the deck of a transport ship off the coast of the Solomon Islands. The sun rises red, and your commander says it's a good omen. You're not so sure. You check your rifle again. Then again, this is where Pearl Harbor has brought you. From a stunned mechanic on a sunny Sunday morning to a soldier prepared to fight back. Island by island. America's entry into the war hasn't just changed your world, it's reshaped the entire global conflict. Hitler declares war on the U.S. Days later, tying the Atlantic and Pacific together in one massive, sprawling cataclysm. Now, there's no backing out. You think of the men who never got off those ships in Hawaii, the ones buried in the water, entombed in steel, still lying beneath the gentle waves. And you promise, quietly, fiercely, to see this through. Pearl Harbor was the start, the explosion that knocked the world's largest sleeping giant wide awake. And now that giant is very dotty, very angry. You're holding onto the rail of the USS Enterprise, staring out at the blue that stretches in every direction, and wondering what exactly you signed up for. The sea is calm, today, calm enough that you can almost pretend you're just on a very long, slightly uncomfortable cruise. But your stomach knows better. Somewhere out there, just beyond the curve of the horizon, an enemy fleet is moving, and you're heading straight for it. It's early June 1942. You're a sailor in the Pacific, a days out from what will become one of the most pivotal naval battles in modern history, Midway. The name sounds quaint, almost accidental, like it's just a point halfway between here and there. But by the time this is over, it'll be carved into your bones like a tattoo. The Japanese fleet is coming. 4 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, the works. The plan is to lure the remaining U.S. Pacific Fleet into a trap and eliminate it. Japan wants to secure its empire and force the U.S. into negotiations. But they don't know you're waiting. Because this time, you're not flying blind. You've got a secret weapon, broken code. U.S. Cryptanalysts have cracked parts of Japan's naval communication codes. They know an attack is coming. They even suspect the target, AF, later confirmed to be Midway, thanks to a clever ruse involving a fake water shortage. Historians still argue whether Japan ever really had a chance once its codes were compromised, or whether the outcome was written in invisible ink before the first shot was fired. You're not thinking about code breaking, though. You're thinking about your boot show. They squeak on the deck and whether you'll be able to sleep tonight with the engines vibrating under your feet like a growling dog. You sleep poorly. Of course. Most do. On the morning of the 4th of June, the sky is already too bright when the call comes. Japanese aircraft are headed for Midway Island. American fighters scramble to meet them. You're not a pilot, but you hear the roar as the Wildcats launch from the deck. The sky above becomes a dance of contrails and flak. Engines shrieking. Bombs falling. You're assigned damage control. Stationed below decks. You wait for the worst with your fingers tight around a fire hose. And then, the radio crackles. Somewhere above you. U.S. Dive bombers, SBD, Dauntless as Shave, located the Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. By a stroke of luck, those decks are full of refueling and rearming aircraft. Exposed like powder kegs. The dive begins. Altitude to attack in seconds. Bomb bay doors open. You imagine those pilots in the moment, before impact heart pounding. Sweat stinging their eyes. Knowing that one clean hit could turn the tide of the war. And they do it. All three carriers are struck. Flames shoot into the sky. The Japanese fleet is caught in a nightmare of its own making. Later, a fourth Japanese carrier Hiryu manages a counterstrike and damages the USS Yorktown. You feel the tremor all the way down in the bulkheads. But Yorktown survives the first hit. Then the second. It's the third that sends her listing. Smoke curling skyward in a long, mournful ribbon. She won't sink that day. But she'll be gone by dawn. You help transfer wounded. The hallways smell like smoke, grease, and blood. One pilot, bandaged from temple to jaw, grabs your arm and croaks out. Did we get him? You nod. 3 of 4. He smiles. Passes out. Maybe relief. Maybe morphine. The next day, Hiryu is located and destroyed. All 4 of Japan's frontline carriers veterans of Pearl Harbor Air now at the bottom of the Pacific. It's a staggering blow. You stand on the deck of the Enterprise that night and listen as the chaplain gives a short, rough eulogy for the dead. No fanfare. Just quiet words drifting into the wind. Followed by a minute of silence, broken only by the waves lapping against steel. Midway wasn't just a battle. It was the battle. A turning point. Japan's expansion halts here. From this moment on, it's all retreat. All defense. The Allies seize the strategic momentum. And though the road ahead is still soaked in fire, now there's a direction to follow forward. You hear stories from the pilots who survived. How they flew through curtains of flak so thick it turned the sun to twilight. How they dove nearly vertical. Engines screaming. Stomachs dropping into their boots. One guy says he blacked out from G-forces and woke up only when his plane leveled out over the ocean. Another lost a finger to a bullet and kept flying. Someone else swears he saw a Japanese deck officer raise a sword to the sky as his carrier Bernita strange. Solem salute. Historians love to debate the number show many planes were lost. How many bombs dropped? How much luck played into it? They argue whether Japan's strategic overreach doomed the operation, or whether Admiral Yamamoto's delayed deployment of the main body was the fatal error. But for you, down in the belly of the ship, surrounded by heat and rivets, and the echo of every explosion, the conclusion is crystal clear. Midway wasn't won by numbers alone. It was won by stubborn men in fragile machines, by codebreakers squinting over intercepted transmissions, by mechanics with greasy hands working through the night, by sailors like you, pumping water, bracing beams, hauling the wounded. None of it was glamorous. All of it mattered. By June 7th, the battle is over. You pass through the mess and see a group of men laughing over burnt coffee and powdered eggs. Someone draws a crude sketch of a Japanese carrier sinking and pins it to the wall. No one cheers. But the atmosphere has shifted. There's a sense that the ocean, once so vast and hostile, just blinked, just flinched. You're still thousands of miles from Tokyo. The Pacific is still a minefield of blood and coral and heat stroke. But tonight, the sea feels a little less cruel, and the stars overhead don't look like distant gods anymore. They look like witnesses. Your boots sink half an inch into broken glass and slush, and it makes the same miserable crunch over and over again with every step. The buildings around you are hollowed-out husks, shattered by mortars and choked with smoke. The snow, falling from the ash-gray sky, seems almost embarrassed to be here. It's January 1943, and you're walking through what's left of Stalingrad. But a year ago, you were outside it, on the edge of this sprawling Soviet city by the Volga River. Just one more dusty face among thousands. You were in the uniform of a German soldier, then stretched thin from a summer campaign that ran too long on too little fuel. And with too much confidence, the High Command thought they could take the city in weeks. Turns out, Stalingrad would swallow the Sixth Army whole and leave only echoes. You still remember the first time you saw it. From a ridge, the city shimmered in the distance like a steel mirage. Factories, smokestacks, apartmentblocks an industrial labyrinth. The Volga curved behind it like a warning. You weren't worried. Not at first. The Wehrmacht had made it across Europe. What was one more Soviet city? But Stalingrad didn't crumble. It clawed back. For every building you captured, they retook it. Every street you secured turned into a shooting gallery. Every cellar had someone waiting with a rifle and nerves of ice. Urban warfare here was a nightmare. The front line wasn't measured in miles, it was measured in meters. Sometimes, just walls. You slept in the same buildings as the enemy, a staircase or ceiling apart. You'd fire through holes punched in walls with sledgehammers. A sniper might take you out through a crack in a pipe. Historians still argue whether this house-to-house brutality was a strategic necessity or a failure of command on both sides. You stop by what used to be Pavlov's house, a 4-story apartment block, where a Soviet platoon held out for 2 full months against everything the Germans could throw at them. They say more German soldiers died trying to take that single building than the Allies lost capturing Paris. The place is now just scorched brick and spent casings. You swear you can still hear whispers. Food was a memory. You boiled leather belts for broth. You stole dog food. Someone you knew once ate a bar of soap. Another guy passed out from hunger mid-firefight. That was the pace of things fast, when it came to dying. Slow for everything else. You never expected to live long enough to feel cold, but winter came anyway. Temperatures dropped below 30 degrees Celsius. Your breath turned to ice inside your nostrils. Rifles cracked from the cold. Engines wouldn't start. You rubbed snow on your skin just to feel something. Meanwhile, the Soviets were preparing their trap Operation Uranus. You didn't know it then. You just noticed the shells stopped falling one morning. And everything got eerily still. That's how you knew something worse was coming. On the 19th of November, 1942, the Red Army launched a two-pronged assault north and south of the city. They didn't hit you. They hit around you, circled you, closed the jaws. In a matter of days, over 250. 000. Axis troops were surrounded, trapped in a freezing, starving cauldron. The Soviets had been simmering for months. You didn't break out. You dug in, or tried to. Hitler ordered General Paulus to hold the city at all costs. No surrender. He barked from Berlin. But you weren't in Berlin. You were here, trying to find warmth next to a stove made from a broken radiator in hope. You ate frostbitten fingers of stolen potatoes. You melted snow in helmets. One guy toasted pages of Mein Kampf for kindling. The irony was not lost on anyone. You shared a trench with a guy from Bavaria who had tied socks around his boots with electrical wire. Another fellow told dirty jokes in 3 languages. A third wrote love letters on toilet paper. You all pretended the Luftwaffe's airlifts were enough to keep you supplied. They weren't. Sometimes, they dropped crates full of summer uniforms. One time, a shipment of condoms. The entire trench laughed until someone started crying. By January, you were down to 1 meal a day, sometimes less. You stopped shaving. You stopped caring. The Soviets kept pushing. Every block became a battlefield. Every hour, a lifetime. Their artillery was relentless. Their tanks moved like sharks through the wreckage. At night, their loudspeakers blared recordings, messages from captured soldiers, the sound of accordion music, and sometimes, just to mess with you, the voice of a child reading names of the dead. You remember when Paulus was promoted to field marshal. You all rolled your eyes. No German field marshal had ever surrendered before, and Hitler expected him to follow tradition. But when the final Soviet assault came and your position was reduced to a single basement in the city's center, tradition didn't seem very important. On the 2nd of February, 1943, Paulus surrendered. Some units still fought for a few more days out of confusion, stubbornness, or sheer insanity, but you laid down your rifle and raised your arms in the snow. You weren't even afraid, just numb, and not from the cold. Out of the 250, 000 Axis troops who entered Stalingrad, fewer than 100. 000 survived to be captured, and of those, less than 6. 000 ever returned home. You were one of them. Stalingrad was the turning point on the Eastern Front. The moment the Soviet Union seized momentum and never gave it back, Hitler's aura of invincibility shattered here. Entire divisions evaporated in the rubble. A myth burned to ashes in the city that bore Stalin's name. Historians still debate the numbers, the logistics, the miscalculations. They tally the tanks, the tonnage, the calories consumed, or denied. But you remember the smell of blood on snow, the silence before shellfire, the creak of ice on your collarbones, the eyes of the guy next to you, red and cracked and never blinking. And now, as you walk the ruins this time, not as a soldier but as a witness, you hear footsteps behind you. Not real ones. Echoes. Boots crunching over glass and frozen dreams. You close your eyes and listen. Stalingrad doesn't just haunt you. It remembers you. The first thing that hits you is the stentrod. Gunpowder. Vetburlap. And something else too sour to name. You're crawling up a low embankment on a gray June morning. Sea spray in your face. Boots soaked through before you've even landed. And somewhere behind you, a sergeant is still yelling over the sound of machine guns, as if volume alone can stop bullets. It's June 6th, 1944 day, and you've just landed on Omaha Beach. The ramp drops. For a second, no one moves. Then all at once, shows. Men charge forward, stumble, vanish into the surf. Water churns red. Bullets tear through the air like steel hornets. You duck low. Cold waves slapping your back. Rifle held high. You've trained for this. But not really. Nobody trains for this. Allied forces have launched Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion in history, over 150. Zero troops are crossing the English Channel to storm the beaches of Nazi-occupied France. 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. You're at the worst of them. Historians still argue whether Omaha's brutal resistance was due to bad intelligence, misjudged tides, or just plain bad luck. You don't care. You're too busy trying not to die. You push forward, tripping over tank traps and fallen comrades. Sand sprays up around you. Every foot gained feels like a mile. The Germans are dug in above, behind concrete bunkers and machine gun nests. You fire back when you can, but mostly you crawl. Flinch. Breathe in, short bursts, and pray the next round doesn't have your name on it. Finally, a few of you make it to the Shingler rocks and driftwood pushed up by the tide. There's no cover, but it's better than open sand. A demolition crew blows a gap in the seawall. You charge again, screaming without meaning to. Your boots hit dirt and keep going. Behind you, landing craft continue to spill men into the surf. Some make it. Some don't. Medics drag the wounded behind craters. One guy barely out of high school clutches his arm like it's a doll coming apart. "Did we win yet?" he asks. Dazed, you don't answer. You just keep moving. By late afternoon, Omaha is taken. Barely. Other beaches fare better. Utah's landing is relatively smooth. At Gold, Juneau, and Sword, British and Canadian forces push inland, linking up with French resistance fighters. The scale is staggering. 5,000 ships. 0,000 planes. A coastal assault that stretches for miles. It's not just a beach landing, it's a nation crashing into another like a wave. You regroup with your unit just beyond the dunes. Setting up in a hedgerow. Normandy is crisscrossed with them thick. Ancient earth walls that turn every field into a fortress. You eat a cold can of beans and realize your hands won't stop shaking. Someone passes you a cigarette. You've never smoked before, but you take it anyway. In the days that follow, the advance is slow. The Germans fight like cornered wolves. Mortars from the bocage. Snipers in the church towers. Tanks hidden beneath. Camouflage nets. Every village is a puzzle of rubble and gunfire. You push through Vierville. Then Saint-Lô. Then, deeper into the Norman countryside. Rain turns the roads to sludge. Your boots never dry. You learn to sleep under tanks. To march on half rations. To identify a minefield by the smell of churned earth and panic. Civilians wave from windows, some with joy, some with caution. One old woman hugs you and weeps into your shoulder. A boy offers you a chicken, then runs off before you can refuse. You've seen photos of liberated cities in newspapers, but nothing prepares you for the real thing, the mix of flowers and fire, flags and funerals. Some towns still have Nazi posters peeling from the walls. Others have slogans painted over them in French. Vive la liberté. One night, as you rest near a bombed-out barn, a British officer tells you how they used inflatable tanks, fake radio chatter, and even a phony army under General Patton to convince the Germans the real invasion would land in Pas-de-Calais. The ruse worked. The bulk of the German forces were caught flat-footed. Historians still argue how much of Day's success was thanks to these deceptions. But sitting there, muddy and exhausted, you decide the fake tanks deserve a medal. You pass through Carentan, then Caen, then finally, Paris. No battle for this one. The resistance rises from the underground. The Germans retreat. On the 25th of August, 1944, Paris is liberated. You enter the city under a sky filled with confetti and flags. French citizens cheer, cry, kiss you on both cheeks. Someone hands you a baguette and a bottle of wine. A woman dances barefoot in the square. You don't even mind that you still smell like old socks and cordite. That night, you climb onto a rooftop and look out over the Seine. The Eiffel Tower stands tall, undamaged, like it had been holding its breath for years. You breathe for the first time in weeks. It tastes like diesel fumes. Victory and hope. But even as Paris celebrates, you know it's not over. The war is still raging in the east. Across Belgium, toward the Rhine, the Ardennes is waiting. So is a frozen forest and something called the Bulge. But tonight, for just one night, the City of Lights lives up to its name again. You lie back against the roof tiles, look up at the stars, and think maybe, just maybe, you're going to make it through this. The trees are too quiet. You're deep in the Ardennes forest now, somewhere near Bastogne, and every breath you take fogs in front of your face like smoke from a ghost's cigarette. It's December 1944. And the whole forest is clenched in a frostbitten grip so tight that even the birds seem frozen in place. You're part of the 101st Airborne, the Screaming Eagles. Though your voice left days ago when your throat went raw from shouting over artillery, no one's screaming now. You're too cold to scream. You dive deeper into your foxhole. Just one more dent in a forest full of dents. The ground is half frozen mud, half bone. Your blanket is a damp wool relic, and your boots leak like political promises. You've wrapped your feet in newspaper, tied your helmet liner with wire, and tried to convince yourself that the crusted snow in your socks is just texture. No one's buying it. This is the battle of the Bulge Hitler's last desperate gamble to break through the Western Front. Over 200. 000 German troops push through the Ardennes in a surprise offensive that catches everyone off guard. The aim? Split the Allies, take Antwerp, and negotiate a peace on Hitler's terms. Spoiler alert, it doesn't go well for him. The Germans hit hard. They drive tanks through mountain passes, roll infantry down icy roads, and drop paratroopers behind your lines dressed in American uniforms. Confusion reigns. One officer quizzes you on baseball stats to make sure you're not a German spy. You pass. Barely. Apparently no one trusts a soldier who doesn't know Babe Ruth's batting average. Bastogne becomes a focal point, a linchpin, and you're right in it. The siege begins. German forces surround the town, cutting off supplies, food, and hope. The weather turns vicious. Overcast skies keep Allied planes grounded. No airdrops. No reinforcements. Just you and your rifle and a pack of gum you've been saving for luck. And no one wants to trade food for it. Either. Everyone's out. Your stomach growls like it's got opinions. Rations run thin, then disappear. You melt snow for water, break icicles off the edges of crates, scavenge frozen potatoes from a field that looks like a set from a war movie, except no one here gets to call cut. You eat them raw, crunching through the frost like a desperate rabbit. The Germans send a delegation under a white flag one morning, offering you a chance to surrender. They hand over a letter, carefully typed, that explains you are surrounded and doomed. Your general, Anthony MacAuliffe, gives a one-word reply, nuts. Historians still debate whether that was defiance or just battlefield sarcasm. But either way, it becomes legend. You take pride in that word. Nuts becomes your rallying cry. When you share that frozen potato later, you whisper it like a prayer. When a shell hits 50 feet from your foxhole and you're still breathing, you mutter it again. Somehow, the absurdity gives you strength. Air support finally arrives after Christmas. When the skies clear for the first time in what feels like years, planes roar overhead, dropping crates of ammo, food, medical supplies. Of them land right in German hands. But no one complains too loudly. You tear into your first hot meal in a week like it's a 5-star buffet. Canned turkey. Never tasted so good. Then come Patton's tanks. You hear them before you see Theman earthquake on treads. The Third Army pushes up from the south, breaking the encirclement. Bastogne doesn't fall. You hold. You hold. That one word becomes a banner in your mind. It's not glorious. It's not pretty. But it's everything. Still. The fighting isn't over. The Bulge becomes a grinding, freezing tug-of-war. The Germans push forward, then stall. Their fuel runs low. Their timetable collapses. They leave tanks abandoned by the road. Crews walking back to the Reich on frostbitten feet. Some freeze, standing up. You pass one, leaning against a tree, like he just stopped to rest and forgot how to live. By mid-January 1945, the bulge in the lines flattens. The Allies regain lost ground. And you're still here. Still wrapped in that moldy blanket. Still chewing on gum that's long since lost its flavor. But you've survived. The largest battle the U.S. Army will fight in World War II. You sit on a stump and look out over the wreckage, twisted trees, abandoned gear, burned out tanks. It's quiet again. But not peaceful. The kind of quiet that comes after a scream. You rub your fingers together and realize you haven't felt them in days. You laugh. Softly. It sounds more like coughing. The Battle of the Bulge costs over 80,000 American casualties. German losses are even higher. Hitler's last offensive has failed. The path to Germany lies open now. The Rhine beckons. Berlin glimmers faintly on the horizon, like a fever dream. But before all that, you get to rest for a minute. You climb into a truck heading west, away from Bastogne. The wind bites your cheeks, but you're too numb to care. Someone hands you a chocolate bar. You nearly cry. It's not the best chocolate. It might not even be real chocolate. But it's not a potato. And that's good enough. As the truck rumbles over frozen roads, you look back at the forest. It's still there. Still full of foxholes and ghosts. You leave a piece of yourself behind in those treesome, frostbitten sliver of your soul that will always be curled in a shallow trench, whispering nuts into the snow. You lean your head back and close your eyes. You held. And that's more than enough. You're stepping over shattered brick and bent rebar now, crunching across the wreckage of what used to be a town square in western Germany. Somewhere beneath your boots is a mosaic floor. Once part of a cafe or a bank or someone's front porch, you can't tell anymore. It's all rubble now. You pose, breathing hard. Reflex long low. The taste of dust and cordite dry on your tongue. You're in the Ruhr pocket. And everything is coming apart. It's April 1945. And Germany is cracking from the inside. The Allies have crossed the Rhine finally, and now you're helping surround the industrial heartland of the Reich. Hitler's last oil. Last factories. Last tanks. Last grasp. The Americans have pushed in from the west. The British from the north. And you're part of the jaws snapping shut. The Ruhr is encircled like a rusted gear caught in a vise. Inside, there are still hundreds of thousands of German soldiers. But they're out of fuel. Out of hope. Out of time. You and your unit are moving through towns that look more like abandoned movie sets. Windows blown out. Roofs gone. Wallpaper still clinging to half-standing walls. There's a photo of a family still nailed to the hallway in one house. The frame is cracked. You wonder if they made it out. Or if their ghosts are watching you sift through their shattered dinner plates. The Germans don't surrender all at once. Some still fight. Snipers pick you off from church towers. Anti-tank guns are hidden behind piles of hay. Booby traps in wine cellars. Grenades dangling from tripwires strung across staircases. One guy in your unit gets his foot blown off opening a wardrobe. You stop touching anything that's not dirt. You take one town at a time. One street at a time. Sometimes one building. The civilians don't know what to do. Some wave white flags from balconies. Others stare from basements, hollow-eyed and silent. You pass a little boy holding a dog and a wooden toy plane. He's too scared to cry. You toss him a piece of chocolate and keep moving. You're exhausted. But the Germans inside the Ruhr are worse off. Their fuel depots are bombed. Their ammo dumps gone. Their tanks are now metal boxes with no tread, parked in alleyways like oversized tombstones. Their radios hum static. Occasionally, someone inside the pocket broadcasts patriotic music marches and speeches, but it sounds warped now, like a record melting in slow motion. The strangest part? They don't all surrender right away, even surrounded, even starving. They dig in. Hitler has ordered them to fight to the death. Some do, but others quietly, hesitantly start surrendering by the hundreds, then thousands. You meet your first group just outside a town called Ludenscheid. 8 German soldiers in filthy uniforms. Their boots held together with wire and tape. Hands up. Sleepless, slung muzzle down. They look like they've been lost in the woods for weeks. One of them speaks English. It is over, he says. Yes, you nod, and take them in. Day after day. More come. Entire regiments, laying down their weapons. They march toward you in lines. Not with defiance, but with weary relief. They're done. So are you. One night, you help process prisoners' names. Ranks. Units. Most are barely older than you. Some much younger. One kid still got ink stains on his fingers, like he left a classroom to join the Wehrmacht. Another insists he was just the cook. You believe him. He smells like onions and soap. There's a debate back at command about how to handle it all. The sheer volume of prisoners is staggering, more than 300. 0 eventually captured in the Ruhr. Historians still debate how such a huge force could collapse so quickly, whether it was logistical failure, crumbling morale, or just the weight of inevitability. Whatever it was, you're ankle-deep in it now. Organizing guards, running supplies, trying not to trip over the irony of it all. You pause one morning in the ruins of a rail station, sipping coffee from a dented tin. A German colonel is being led past in cuffs, his boots still polished, uniform pressed. He glances at you, and for a moment, you're not sure what's in his eyes. Shame, resentment, or just fatigue. You nod. He nods back, and the moment's gone. Elsewhere, in the north, the British have captured Bremen. To the south, American units push into Bavaria. And in the east, the Red Army is pounding at Berlin's gates. Block by block, you hear rumors. Hitler in a bunker. Himmler trying to negotiate. Goebbels broadcasting lunacy until the static eats him alive. The end is crawling closer every hour. But here, in the Ruhr, it's already over. You see it in the way soldiers sit when they've stopped pretending. The way they light cigarettes without rushing. The way they look at the sky, like it might forgive them. You think about everything that led to this. Normandy, the bulge, the frozen woods, the foxholes, the guys you buried with dog tags in their mouths. You think about your first sergeant, the one who said, "This war will end in a whisper." Not a bang. You didn't believe him. Now you do. You pack up to move east. Orders are clear. Advance toward the Elbe. The Soviets are coming from the other side. You're told not to engage them unless fired upon. It feels weird. knowing the next faces you see might be Soviet one same war. Different language. Different ghosts. You throw your gear into the back of a transport truck and climb in. The road ahead is muddy, lined with broken fences and trees sheared in half. Someone plays a harmonica in the back. Off-key, but not bad. You look back once more at the Ruhr. Smoke still rises in places. Birds wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, you hear laughter, maybe from a group of POWs. Or maybe from your own men. Either way, it's strange, but not wrong. You lean back, rifle across your knees, and close your eyes. This part's done. Now, Berlin waits. You're crouched in the ruins of a train yard. The smell of diesel and burnt rubber curling around you like a greasy scarf. In the distance, artillery pounds in rhythmic waves, and the sky over Berlin flashes with angry light. You grip your helmet with one hand and steady your rifle with the other, waiting for the next signal. You're part of the Red Army, now shoulder to shoulder with thousands, pushing into the city that started it all. It's April 1945, and Berlin is about to break. The streets are hell. Not fire and brimstone, hell just man-made. Brick by brick, bomb by bomb hell. Every corner is a death trap. Every window, a sniper's perch. Every basement full of last-ditch machine guns, manned by teenage boys in Hitler Youth armbands or old men, wheezing behind rusted MG-42s. Hitler's ordered the city to be defended to the last man. Berlin intends to obey. You intend to stop it. You're advancing block by block, building by building. This isn't war, it's demolition with bayonets. The Soviets have poured millions into the offensive. Mortars, infantry, flamethrowers, Katyusha rockets that scream like banshees before turning entire neighborhoods into rubble. You've seen buildings collapse inward, like they just gave up. Streets become rivers of concrete dust. And yet, Berlin fights on. You pass bodies in SS uniforms, civilians with white flags draped from windows, and the blackened husks of trucks still smoldering. One house you clear still has a table set for dinner, a loaf of bread fossilized in the center, a cup of tea gone cold months ago. The house next door is nothing but cinders. Historians still argue whether the Soviet assault on Berlin was more about vengeance or strategy, whether Stalin needed to take the capital, or whether he just wanted to. But you're not thinking about geopolitics. You're thinking about the guy next to you who hasn't blinked in 10 minutes. And whether that scream you heard 3 blocks back was victory or surrender. German civilians emerge from cellars like mole people, haggard, starving, eyes wide and untrusting. You hand one a piece of bread, and she stares at you like you're made of smoke. Another tries to give you a wedding ring. You shake your head and walk on. Your job's not over yet. By the 25th of April, Soviet and American troops meet at the Elbe River. The pincer is complete. Germany is carved down the middle like a pie, cooling on a very angry windowsill. You hear that American soldiers are handing out cigarettes and chocolate to German POWs. You're not sure how to feel about that. In Berlin, the final assault tightens. You push toward the Reichstag, the symbolic heart of Nazi Germany. The building is barely standing. Its dome is shattered. Its columns cracked. But Hitler's forces are holed up inside, determined to hold it. Why? Because it looks good in photos. because symbolism doesn't bleed, but it can certainly burn. You fight room to room, hallway to hallway. Bullets ping off stone. The smell of urine, ash, and scorched metal overwhelms everything. You slip on blood someone else's. You hope. Your boot lands next to a discarded iron cross. Outside, the red flag goes up. Soldiers climb the battered Reichstag with a hammer and sickle sewn to a makeshift pole. They plant it atop the roof like a red exclamation mark at the end of a very loud, very long sentence. A photographer captures the moment dramatic, heroic, staged. Historians still debate whether the image was manipulated later to remove extra wristwatches looted from corpses. But it doesn't matter. The image goes everywhere. The war, it says, is ending, but beneath the streets, it isn't quite over. Down in the Führer bunker, Hitler is hiding from his own failure. The Soviets are just blocks away when he swallows poison and a bullet on the 30th of April. Eva Braun goes with him. The world doesn't even pause. You hear the rumors in hushed tones. He's dead. No body. They burned him. Someone snorts. Cowards exit. Another guy lights a cigarette with shaking fingers and mutters. Good. Now we can go home. Oh, on May 2nd. Berlin surrenders. The German capital, the city of rallies and flags and terrible speeches, lies silent under Soviet boots. You stand in a street lined with skeletons of buildings and see children playing with the rusted husk of a tank like it's a jungle gym. A woman sweeps glass off her front steps, dressed in rags and defiance. You nod to her. She nods back. There's celebration. Sure. Flags waving. Guns fired into the air. Vodka passed around like medicine. But the joy is strange. Thin. Like it hasn't learned how to walk yet. Everyone is too tired. Too haunted. Some things aren't fixed by victory. Later that week, you help guard a checkpoint near Brandenburg Gate. A convoy rolls through American officers in jeeps, saluting politely. One tosses you a chocolate bar. You pocket it. It doesn't feel like sharing weather. That night, you sit beneath a broken statue and write a letter you've tried to write a dozen times before. We took the city. You scrawl. It's over. You pause. Look at your hands. Then add, I think, Anders. You wonder what Berlin was like before all this, when the lampposts were lit, and music drifted from windows, and bakeries opened at dawn. Maybe someday it'll be like that again. But not today. Today, it's still smoking. Still bleeding, but it's finished. You're squinting under the brutal white sun of the Pacific now, surrounded by volcanic rock and the whine of flies. The air smells like gunpowder and sweat, and your uniform sticks to your back in patches stiff with dried salt. You've landed on Iwo Jima's. That Iwo Jima and nothing about it feels like victory. It's February 1945. The island's only 8 square miles. But it might as well be the moon. Black sand, jagged cliffs, and bunkers so deep they seem to stretch into the Earth's molten core. You came ashore with the first wave of Marines. You thought you knew chaos. Then you hit that beach. And chaos introduced you to its meaner cousin, volcanic hellfire. The sand is too soft to run on, too hot to sit on, and too open to hide. Japanese mortars open up the moment the landing craft drop their ramps. Men go down in clusters. You dive forward, dragging your gear through ash-colored sludge. Bullets sowing the air above your head. You aim toward the base of Mount Suribachi, knowing that inside that sleeping volcano are networks of tunnels filled with soldiers who've sworn not to surrender. This isn't about territory. It's about strategy. Iwo Jima is halfway between the Mariana Islands and Japan. If you take it, your bombers will have a place to refuel, and your fighters a place to escort. The Japanese know that, too. That's why they've dug in so deep. Historians still argue whether Iwo Jima was worth the cost in blood. But that question doesn't help you now, not with the air thick with smoke and screaming. You move inch by inch. Literally. Some days, you advance yards. Other days, you don't move at all. The Japanese are invisible until they're not, until a trapdoor opens. A grenade flies out, and the guy next to you disappears in a red flash. You fire into caves, hurl flamethrowers into pillboxes, clear one tunnel, only to find another underneath it. It's not just fighting, it's excavating. Mount Suribachi looms. Always. You watch it like a haunted house on a hill. And every time you blink, you swear it shifts just slightly. Like it's watching you back. Then, one day, the mountain stops firing. A team of Marines scales it slowly, painfully, past craters and dead ends and booby traps. They reach the top, and you hear it first. A cheer. Then you see it. The flag. A small one at first. Then, later that day, a bigger one. And someone snaps a photo. You'll see it everywhere later. The second flag raising on Mount Suribachi, caught in a single frame by Joe Rosenthal's 6 men, straining together, the stars and stripes reaching upward like it's clawing out of the earth itself. It'll become a symbol, a postage stamp, a statue. But in this moment, you don't care about history. You just care that maybe, just maybe, the worst part is over. It's not. The Japanese still control the northern half of the island. The fighting continues. For weeks. Days blur into each other, marked only by how many men you lose before breakfast. You stop cleaning your rifle. You stop writing letters. You dream about running water and cold socks. One night, you're caught in a mortar barrage. You duck behind a ridge with a corporal who hasn't said 10 words all week. As shells thud into the ground, he pulls out a harmonica and starts playing Home on the Range. You both laugh, and it's the kind of laugh that sounds like crying. Eventually, you reach the final caves. The enemy refuses to come out. You pump fire and grenades into the tunnels. They still don't come. It's only when the silence falls like someone cut the audio to the island that you realize it's really over. It takes 36 days to secure Iwo Jima. Nearly 7. 0 Americans are dead. Over 20. 0. Japanese are killed. A few hundred surrender, barely that. Some refuse until the bitter end. Emerging weeks later, gaunt and trembling, waving makeshift white flags made from undershirts. After the last shots fade, you're assigned cleanup duty. You walk through fields of wreckage, burned tanks, shattered rifles, boots still standing upright without feet in them. You find letters never sent, dog tags clutched in skeletal hands. And once, a photo of a girl taped inside a helmet. You sit on a crate and try to remember what day it is. You give up. The island begins to transform. Engineers clear airstrips, construct bases, build medical stations. The same black sand you fought through now hosts the landing gear of B-29 bombers on their way to Japan. You watch one lift off and disappear into the blue haze of distance. You wonder if it'll make it back. You help bury the dead. It takes days. Rows of crosses line the beach. You whisper names as you plant markers. Some familiar, some never known. You remove your helmet when taps plays from a trumpet bent at the bell. The wind blows the last note away before it can finish. They say the island is secure now. You're told you'll ship out soon. Maybe to Okinawa. Maybe home. You clean your gear half-heartedly. Like you're packing for a trip you don't want to take. A chaplain gives a short speech about valor. No one claps. That night, you walk the edge of Suribachi. The flag still flaps. High above the chaos you clawed through. Below, the sea crashes against the black shore, endlessly erasing and rewriting the past. You wonder what this place will look like in 50 years. Will someone picnic here? Will they swim? You doubt it. You close your eyes and try to forget the sounds. The cave echoes. The crack of fire. The silence that always came just a second too late. You whisper a name, then another, then one more. You remember them all. And somehow, that's the only thing keeping you together. You're back on a train now, though it barely feels like motion. The landscape slides by in sepia-dusty plains. Broken barns. Forgotten rail yards. But your eyes keep drifting inward. You're heading home. Technically. But after everything. What does home even mean? You shift in your seat. Fingers tracing the brim of a crumpled cap. Still smelling faintly of oil and gunpowder. The war is over. But you're not sure if your body knows it yet. Other soldiers sit beside you. Some talk about sweethearts. Others sleep sitting up. One guy stares out the window like it's a movie he's seen before but can't stop watching. You don't say much. You're too busy listening to the ghosts rattling around in your memory. Normandy. Bastogne. Iwo. Okinawa. They don't speak. Not exactly. But they don't shut up either. You reach a station in Missouri. And there's a brass band waiting. Girls in polka dot dresses. Banners that say "Welcome Home." Like it's a class reunion and not the tail end of a global inferno. People clap. You try to smile. It feels like borrowing someone else's mouth. A woman hands you a paper cup of lemonade. It's warm and tastes like dishwater. You thank her anyway, somewhere in town. A man's giving a speech. You catch phrases like heroes, freedom, and never forget. You nod. But inside, you wonder what happens when people do forget. When the flags are folded, and the uniforms boxed away, and the noise fades into a silence, so complete it starts to feel like absence. Back home, the streets are too wide, the houses too still. You drop your duffel bag on the porch and hesitate. Inside, your mother is cooking something with onions and potatoes. She hugs you like you might vanish. You hug her back like you already did. That night, you sleep in your old room. Same bed. Same desk. Same photo of a baseball team tacked to the wall. But the dreams are new. You dream of trenches and clouds shaped like warships. You wake up sweaty, tangled in the blanket, heartbeat thudding like incoming artillery. In the morning, you walk down Main Street. People wave. You try to wave back. You visit the soda shop, the one where you used to sit and drink cherry phosphates. It's still there. The same stool squeaks, but the kid behind the counter is different. And the jukebox plays something that wasn't invented when you left. You go to the library. And the headlines are all about rebuilding. Germany divided. Japan occupied. War crimes trials. Nuclear power. The Cold War is starting to hum, like an engine warming up. The next chapter is already writing itself. You close the paper. Your brain feels full. Some of your friends made it back. You meet at the park. Sit on a bench that used to hold 3, but now only holds 2. You talk. But not about the war. Not directly. You say things like, "Remember that time in France? And those lousy rations." And you both laugh too hard. Then there's a silence. And neither of you fills it. One day, a kid asks you what the war was like. You pose. You think about the mud, the noise, the frozen mornings and burning afternoons. You think about the way a man screams when he doesn't know he's dying, or how silence can be so thick you'd swear the air itself is praying. You think about the flag on Suribachi, the ruined streets of Berlin, the girls in Paris, the boys who didn't come back. You say, "Loud?" And that's all. He nods like. He understands. You know he doesn't. And that's fine. Maybe it's better that way. You take a job at the mill, or the post office, or maybe you go back to school. Something quiet. Something with structure. You keep a photo in your wallet, your unit. Smiling in a trench. Mud up to their knees. You only look at it when you're alone. The days pass. Slowly. Then all at once, people move on. Marry. Build houses. Raise a kids. Buy Chevrolets. You sit on your porch and sip coffee. That's too bitter. And watch leaves change color like they always have. You still flinch when thunder cracks too close. You still check doorways when you walk into a room. But the world keeps insisting it's at peace. You write letters to buddies still stationed overseas. You hear from one in Tokyo, another in Nuremberg. One day, a letter comes back unopened. You don't open that envelope either. You just tuck it in a drawer. Sometimes, when the town goes quiet at night, you walk down by the river, just to breathe, just to be still. You skip a stone, watch it hop across the surface and vanish. You whisper a name, maybe 2, maybe more. The sky above is full of stars now, not searchlights, not flares, just stars. And for the first time in what feels like a century, you think, maybe they're watching back. You're unpacking your footlocker in a garage that smells like old engine grease and drying hay. Each item more loaded with memory than you expected. A comb, still stained with Okinawa's red dirt. A pair of dog tags clinking like ghosts when they touch. A letter you never sent. Creased and water-spotted. You try to throw it away. You don't. It's been months since the war ended. and yet your body still reacts to loud noises, to the smell of smoke, to certain kinds of rain. You walk down the street and notice everything where the exits are, where someone could be hiding. You know it doesn't make sense. But that doesn't stop your spine from tightening whenever someone slams a door too hard. You smile when people greet you, but your jaw stays clenched long after the hello is over. They're calling you part of the greatest generation now. Newspapers run stories about returning heroes. There's a parade downtown, with marching bands and kids waving flags and a mayor who gives a speech about sacrifice. You stand in the crowd, not on the float. When someone asks why, you shrug and say, "Too hot for a uniform." Really. You just don't want to wear it again. Jobs are opening up. The factories that used to churn out tanks are now producing refrigerators and radios. You take a position at the local hardware store, helping folks pick out screws and paint swatches like you didn't just help take apart entire cities. It's quiet work. Predictable. That's what you need. That. And the smell of sawdust normal. Clean. American. At night, do you lie in bed and stare at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above you? You count the blades. 1, 2, 3, 4. You listen to the hum. You wonder how many fans are spinning right now in bombed-out buildings half a world away. You wonder if someone over there is staring back at their own ceiling. Thinking about you, you get invited to the American Legion. At first, you don't go. Too many stories. Too many reminders. But eventually, curiosity wins. You walk in one evening and find a half-dozen men at the bar, all with the same eye-sweary. Tired. Always scanning. They're laughing. But it's a tired kind of laughter. The kind that comes from knowing you all made it through the same storm, even if some pieces of you didn't. You swap stories. Not the real ones, but the ones you can share over a beer, the ones with funny endings. You leave out the parts with screaming, the dark rooms, the names you still whisper in your sleep. They do too. Every now and then, a younger guy walks in. A cousin. A neighbor. Someone who asks what it was like. You all look at each other. Someone tells a joke about sea rations and dysentery. Someone else says, "We just did what we had to." Then you all go quiet for a while. You hear about the Nuremberg trials on the radio. Nazi officials being tried for crimes that don't have names yet. Crimes against humanity. The words sound strange in the announcer's mouth, like he's not sure they're real. You listen. You shake your head. You don't say anything. Some of the footage makes it into newsreels at the theater. You don't watch. You also hear about atomic bombs. Tests in the desert. The Soviets making one of their own. The Cold War starting to freeze across Europe. You fought to end one war, and now you can already see the shadow of the next. You wonder if anyone will remember what this one really cost by the time the next one begins. One day you get a letter from Japan, a former soldier you helped process during the occupation. You didn't think he'd remember you. He thanks you for not treating him like an animal. He says his family is rebuilding. He includes a small sketch of his garden, drawn on rice paper. You put it on your fridge, held up by a magnet shaped like a chicken. You meet someone. Maybe she works at the diner. Or maybe she's a neighbor who brings pie to your porch. You don't talk about the war right away, but she doesn't push. She just listens when you do. And when you wake up sweating at 3 o'clock, M. She puts a hand on your back and waits until your breathing steadies. You marry in a church with peeling paint and tulips by the steps. Your buddies from the Legion sit in the front row, fidgeting with their hats. She wears blue. You wear a tie. You forget to bring the ring. You laugh about it later. Even though your hands were shaking the whole time, you buy a small house, fix the porch, paint the shutters, grow tomatoes in the backyard. You don't plant flowers. Tout délicate. You want things that fight to grow. When your first child is born, you sit by their crib and listen to their breathing. You watch their chest rise and fall, and wonder how it's possible to love something so fragile. You promise yourself you'll never let them see the things you've seen. You know that's impossible, but you promise anyway. As they grow up, you tell them bedtime stories not about the war, but about dragons and explorers and faraway stars. You keep your medals in a drawer. You let them see them once. On Veteran Day, they ask if you were scared. You say yes. Then you tuck them in and sit in the hallway for a while, just listening. You learn how to live again. Slowly, you learn that peace is not the same as silence, that joy can exist beside grief, that healing isn't a straight line, it's a dance. Forward and back. Some days are good. Others, less so. But you keep going, because the war is over. Because you came home, because that's what they would have wanted. You're standing at the edge of a field in 1946. Hands in your pockets, staring at a rusting tractor that hasn't moved since the summer of '41. The grass has crept halfway up the wheels, like it's trying to swallow time. The war's over. But your routines don't feel like peace yet. They feel like maintenance of fences, of engines, of a self that still doesn't quite fit inside your own skin. You've started smoking again. You quit back in Saipan because it was impossible to keep matches dry. But now the click of the lighter feels like punctuation, something final, something you can control. You walk the fields with a cigarette between your teeth, squinting against the wind, pretending it's just another day. Your wife calls from the porch. Supper's ready. You nod. But you don't move right away. You like the quiet out here. There are no explosions in the corn rows. No shouted orders. Just wind. Birds. Maybe the occasional far-off hum of a truck on the highway. You think about the silence that follows, worn at the absence of sound. But the weight of everything that didn't get said. Everything too big for words. You eat dinner meatloaf and green beans. The kind of meal that would have felt like treasure back in a foxhole. Your kid insists on telling a joke halfway through chewing. You laugh too hard, maybe too loudly, but it feels good, even if your hands still twitch when someone drops a plate. Later, you help with homework. Something about maps. Your child points to Germany and says, "You were there? Right?" You nod. "Was it scary?" they ask. You say, "Sometimes." And that's enough for them. You and your wife go dancing on a Friday night, at a hall that used to host war bond rallies. The same band plays different lyrics now. You hold her close. Move slow. Try not to notice the other men in the room, who step just a little too carefully. She doesn't ask questions. She just rests her head against your shoulder. And, for a while, that's all you need. One afternoon, you visit the town hall for a ceremony. New plaques honoring the fallen. Gold stars on bronze. Names you know too well. One is your best friend's. The guy who never made it out of Bastogne. His mother squeezes your arm and says, "He looked up to you." You nod, not trusting your voice. You place a flower beneath his name and walk away before the band starts playing again. At night, you sort through old letters. Some are yours. Some are ones you never meant to open. Never meant to keep. One's from a girl in France. You almost wrote back. Another's from a chaplain, thanking you for a prayer you don't even remember saying. You read them all in the faint light of your workshop, the bulb swinging gently overhead. Sometimes you wake up thinking you're still there, back in the mud, back in a foxhole with rainwater soaking through your boots. You blink and realize you're safe, but your pulse doesn't know that. It gallops like a horse in a burning barn. Your wife keeps lavender in a drawer by the bed now. Says it helps. Maybe it does. You help build a new wing at the local school. Volunteer work. Part of the community's effort to get back to normal. But what even is normal? You remember when normal meant blackout curtains and ration books. Now it means baby carriages and the smell of laundry on the line. You hammer nails into fresh lumber and try not to think about all the scaffolding inside you still waiting for repairs. The papers say the world is healing. The Marshall Plan is rebuilding Europe. Tokyo is rising from rubble. The UN meets to prevent the next one. You read it all, but you don't trust it yet. Hope, you've learned, is fragile. You hold it gently. At church, they ask you to stand for recognition. You do, but you keep your eyes low. The pastor reads a list of those who didn't return, and you mouth each name like a prayer. Afterward, someone pats your shoulder and says, "Thank you for your service." You reply, "I'm just glad I made it home." You don't say what you're thinking. Not everyone who made it home made it all the way back. You and your wife take a trip to the lake one summer. Just the two of you. You rent a cabin. It smells like pine and dust and the kind of peace that's been waiting a long time. You sit on the dock with your feet in the water and talk about things that don't matter whether. Tomatus. Whether the fish are biting. You kiss her hand without thinking. She smiles like she's still seeing you come down the station steps in uniform. Back in town. The next 4th of July rolls around. Fireworks light up the sky. Your kid cheers. You pretend you're not flinching. One bursts a little too close. Too bright. Your body braces. Your hands curl. Then you feel her fingers in yours firm. Steady. Here. The fire fades. You breathe. You keep going. Every day, a little more ordinary. Every step a little more yours. Because survival isn't just getting through the war. It's learning how to stay alive after. You wake one morning with the sunlight falling across your face in thin golden lines. Filtered through curtains, your wife sewed herself. The house is still. Peaceful. No sirens. No roll call. Just the tick of the clock in the hallway and the faint scent of coffee wafting from the kitchen. It's been a year since the war ended. You keep track without even meaning to. Your memory marks time and distance from gunfire. You pour yourself a cup and sit at the table, noticing the silence denote emptiness, but fullness. There are no orders coming down. No whistles blowing. No one telling you where to be. In 10 minutes, just the soft creak of the floorboards and a calendar you no longer dread flipping, you've learned the rhythm of civilian life again. Mostly. You go to work. You plant tomatoes in rows. You write your child's name on their school books and patch their coat when it tears. But beneath it all, you still feel the echo of marches, of boots on gravel, of footsteps not followed by voices. You get a letter from a man you served with in France. He writes from Arizona, now teaching high school history. Of all things, says his students think the war was just a map full of arrows and red lines. You write back, it was mostly mud. And waiting. You smile when you send it. You both know that's only part of the truth. Sometimes you and your buddies from the Legion gather at Miller's Bar on Saturdays. You drink beer that's a little too warm and tell stories that keep getting funnier, sadder depending on who's listening. One guy swears he still has sand from Iwo Jima in his boots. Another brings a harmonica and plays old jazz standards off-key. You sit back, sip your drink, and for a while, let the years blur. But other nights, it's harder. Sometimes the dreams come again, not the chaotic, screaming ones, but the quiet ones that hurt more. You dream of the soldier who always carried a photo of his dog back home, or the kid who died humming a song from a radio show. You wake up with those details clinging to you, like wet clothes you can't shake off. One Sunday afternoon, you take a drive with your family, just for the sake of it. The fields blur past, green and full, and the sky feels too large to be real. You stop at a roadside diner. Your kid gets a chocolate milkshake, and you watch them drink it like it's magic. You try not to think about children in cities far away, children who never got this moment. You try, but it lingers like a film on your tongue. At home, you help your child build a treehouse. The nails go in crooked, but the structure holds. They climb up, laughing, and for a second, you remember how it felt to be a kiddo, build something for no other reason than joy. You sit beneath it and wipe your brow, watching clouds drift overhead in slow, indifferent procession. You hear on the radio about something called the G2. Bill opportunities to go to college, buy a home, start a business. A man from the bank talks to you about a loan. You nod through the paperwork, pretending to understand it all. Mostly, you're just stunned that people are thinking about futures again. The war taught you to live one day at a time. Now you're learning to imagine whole years. The newspapers are filled with stories about the Soviets, about Europe being carved into zones and ideologies. New lines are being drawn, this time with pens instead of tanks. Historians already whisper about a new conflict forming, cold and creeping. You tuck the paper under your arm and think, not again, not yet. You take your child to the movies. It's a Western cowboys and saloons and dusty streets. The hero gets shot and keeps walking. Your child cheers. You don't. You just notice the way the actor flinches too late, falls too gracefully. You sit through the credits anyway, because your kid's hand is in yours. And the popcorn smell is thick in the air. On Veteran Day, you're asked to speak at the school. You stand in front of a room full of young faces, eyes wide, pencils ready. You talk about friendship, about sacrifice. You tell them war isn't about glory, it's about endurance, about doing what's needed when no one's looking. One student asks if you were scared. You pose. And then you say, "Yes. And being scared is what made me careful enough to come home." That night, your wife touches your arm as you're brushing your teeth and says, "You're getting better." You look in the mirror. You smile. She's right. You still carry the war. But it doesn't weigh the same. You write letters to families of men you served with. Not out of duty, but because they deserve to know. You tell them how brave he was, how quick he smiled, how he kept his compass tied to his belt with string like it was lucky. You leave out the blood. You send the letters and hope they bring some peace, even if only a flicker. Time passes. Your child grows. The treehouse gets repainted. You trade your old boots for gardening shoes. The nightmares come less often. And when they do, they fade faster. You visit friends in the hospital. Some sick, some slipping. You hold their hands. And for a moment, you're young again, ducking through ruined alleys and watching for snipers. Then the moment passes, and you're just a man saying goodbye. You find a scrap of cloth in an old footlocker one day, a fragment of flag, burned at the edge, torn in the middle. You don't remember saving it. But here it is. You tuck it back in and close the lid. Not buried. Not forgotten. Just waiting. The days are softer now. The grass grows taller than it used to. The wind smells cleaner. You walk a little slower. But you walk with purpose. Because you survived. Because you endured. Because peace, no matter how fragile, is something you helped build. You find yourself standing beneath a bronze statue in the town square. General MacArthur, cast in mid-stride, one hand on his hip, the other pointing somewhere ambiguous. Kids ride bicycles around the base, circling history like it's just another weekend. A plaque at your feet reads, "Freedom is not free." You shift your stance. Something about the phrase feels both completely true and far too neat. It's 1,950 now. Give or take. The war's been over 5 years. And still, it's never quite over. You've got a decent job at the hardware store. Or maybe you manage the feed mill or work for the telephone company. You clock in. You clock out. You make coffee in the break room and talk about box scores and weather fronts and which lawnmower blade rusts fastest. No one talks about bayonets anymore. At home, the kids are growing fast legs too long for last year's jeans. Voices cracking. Questions flying. "Dad, were you scared in the war?" One of them asks over breakfast. You don't answer right away. You pour syrup. You sip your coffee. "Yes." You say, "Finally. And that helped me come home?" In your garage. A helmet still sits on a shelf above the workbench. You haven't touched it in years. But dust can't hide the dent above the left ear or the faded number stenciled along the rim. You run your fingers along the edge, half expecting it to still hum with gunfire. But it's quiet. You let it be. There's a new war now. Korea. Police action. They call it. Like giving it a lighter name will make the bullets less sharp. You know better. You watch the newsreels in the movie theater and recognize the terrain. The helmets. The expressionless faces. You wonder if they're scared too. Or if they're still riding the numb momentum you remember so well. You hear about a neighbor's boy who ships out. The family throws a going-away picnic. You bring coleslaw, shake hands, pat shoulders, say things like, "You'll be fine." But later, in your truck, you sit for a long time with your hands on the wheel and your eyes unfocused. You know how thin the line is between fine and forever gone. Sometimes you wake up early and sit on the back porch, watching the sky brighten from steel gray to soft pink. The birds start singing long before the town stirs. You find yourself cataloging the sounds. No bombs. No screaming. No orders shouted in the dark. Just dew dripping from the gutter and a rooster a few blocks away, practicing bad timing. Your wife joins you with 2 mugs of coffee. She wraps her robe tight and leans into your shoulder. Neither of you speaks for a while. Then she asks, gently, "You were dreaming again." You nod. They were all there. She doesn't ask who. She knows. You've started volunteering at the school, talking to the senior civics class once a month. They ask good questions, thoughtful, blunt, sometimes funny in ways they don't mean to be. What was the food like? Did anyone ever mutiny? Did you have a girlfriend in Europe? You laugh, but then they get quiet, leaning in as you describe the beaches, the cities with no roofs, the letters that never made it home. Was it worth it? One brave kid asks. You pose. You say, "We thought so at the time." Historians still debate it. Of course. Whether Dresden was necessary, whether Stalin was ever trustworthy, whether the atom bomb ended the war, or only began something worse. You've read the books. You've watched the documentaries. You don't have an answer. Only memories. Some blurry, some sharp enough to cut. You visit a friend's grave. Every year, on the same day, you bring a small flag and a can of root beer, the kind he used to drink too fast in the motor pool. You sit on the grass and talk about everything and nothing. About the weather, the price of milk, how the Reds are doing. You tell him you're doing okay, that his name is still remembered. Sometimes, your oldest comes home from college, full of new ideas, questions about nationalism and foreign policy, and whether war is ever justified. You listen. You nod. You encourage the thinking. But when they start to dismiss the past with broad strokes, you gently push back. People are complicated. You say, war's even more so. You and your wife take a trip to Washington. D.C. You walk the National Mall, visit the monuments, stand before the tomb of the unknown soldier, and feel something shift inside you, something solemn and tender and heavy. You watch the guards in perfect step and wonder who they dream about. Later, at the World War II Memorial, you trace your fingers over bronze battle names: Midway, Anzio, Saipan, Normandy. Each one is a door you could open if you wanted. But you choose not to. Instead, you just stand there, letting the wind pass over your shoulders, like a whisper from the sea. On the train ride back, you write a few lines in a notebook. I was there. I came home. I remember. You don't show it to anyone. You don't have to. The years stretch on. Birthdays. Graduations. The house needs a new roof. Your joints protest the stairs. You laugh more than you used to. Even if your laugh is slower now, You spend afternoons tinkering with the radio, listening to swing music and remembering how she looked at the USO dance in '44. One evening, you hear your grandson playing with plastic army men in the yard. He's yelling orders, making explosion sounds, pretending to be a hero. You watch from the window. Part of you smiles. Another part aches. Later, you kneel beside him and say, "You know, in real life, the best soldiers were the ones who came home and never wanted to play war again." He thinks about that, and somehow, that gives you hope. The years blur now. Not because you're old, though the knees certainly creak louder than they used to, but because the world keeps rushing forward like it's trying to outrun memory. Still, you hold on to the ones that matter. You wake up to birdsong and bacon. Read the newspaper over toast. And try not to wince when headlines echo old fears. The Cold War simmers. Proxy wars flare. But the past has taught you patience. You've learned to sit with uncertainty. You spend more time with your grandkids these days. They ask endless questions. The way kids do. Did you really shoot a tank? What's a trench like? Is a foxhole made by a fox? You chuckle and shake your head. You tell them the truth mostly. I didn't shoot a tank, but I saw one roll over a piano once. That satisfies them. For now, your oldest granddaughter, the one who reads every book twice, asks if she can interview you for her school project about World War II. She says, eyes wide behind her thick glasses, "You're kind of a living primary source." You chuckle again. Primary source makes you sound like an artifact in a museum. But you agree. She sits across from you with a notebook and a cassette recorder, clicking buttons with more confidence than you'll ever have with those plastic contraptions. She asks about enlistment, about basic training, about landing in Europe. You keep your voice steady. Choose your stories, carefully owns with courage, with oddball moments, with small victories that feel safe to share. You leave out the parts that still visit in dreams. Did you ever get scared? She asks. Pen frozen above the page. Every day. You say, and I think that's what kept me alive. You see her write that down carefully. Later. She'll win second place at the state fair for that report. You'll keep the ribbon tucked in a drawer, next to your discharge papers and a photo of your platoon, taken the day before everything changed. Back at the Legion Hall, the crowd's a little thinner now. The laughter's quieter, and the stories are softer around the edges. There's a new crop of veterans Korea. Vietnam young. Once. Now gray like you. You nod at each other in recognition. A brotherhood stitched, not by war, but by survival. No rank here. Just memory. A young man stands at the bar. Dress shirt, tucked in too neatly. Eyes scanning the room. He's from the local college. Doing some oral history project. Wants to collect first-hand accounts before they vanish. You offer him a seat and a beer. He asks good questions. And you offer him small truths. The worst part wasn't the fighting. You say, it was coming home and realizing the world kept spinning without you. Okay, he nods. Scribbling. Do you think people today understand what it cost? You stare into your drink. Some do. Most forget. But that's not their fault. Ice. One evening, you visit a traveling war memorial rows of white crosses set up in a public park. each tagged with a name. You find a few you recognize. You run your thumb across the laminated cards. Behind you, someone's playing taps on a trumpet, the notes drifting like mist over the lawn. You don't cry. You just breathe. Later that night, your wife finds you in the garage, sitting on the old folding chair, holding a medal you hadn't looked at in years. It's dull now. The ribbon frayed. She says nothing, just rests a hand on your shoulder. And that's enough. You keep busy, fixing things, building birdhouses, volunteering at the VA. You find comfort in small, tangible acts, the kind of work where progress is visible. Unlike the chaos of memory, you plant a tree in the backyard, a sturdy oak. Tell your grandkids it'll still be standing long after you're gone. They laugh and say, "You're not going anywhere." You laugh too, but with a different cadence. One morning, a letter arrives from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Inside is a certificate and a form for a grave marker. You fold it neatly, place it in a manila envelope, and slide it into the file cabinet under End of Life. You don't mention it to anyone. You've learned that some things are easier faced alone. You read more now. Memoirs, history books. You find yourself underlining things, muttering when a detail is wrong. You chuckle when a historian speculates about battles you were in. Didn't happen like that? You whisper, "But sure." Oh. Historians still argue about almost everything, whether certain battles were necessary, whether victory was inevitable, whether the bomb shortened the war or scarred humanity forever. You've learned not to debate. You just nod and think. They weren't there. You sit on the porch with your dog, sipping tea, watching the sky stretch wide. It's late spring. Somewhere, a lawnmower buzzes. You close your eyes and let the warmth sink into your skin. For a moment, you hear nothing but the breeze in the trees and the distant laugh of a child. No sirens. No planes. No fear. Just now, just peace. You move slower now. And people notice. Not in a bad way. More like they hold doors longer. Repeat questions with softer voices. And smile when you grumble about newfangled nonsense, like digital thermostats or online banking. You've earned it. They say. You nod, though you're not always sure what you've earned. A chair by the window, an extra slice of pie, the right to not explain your past unless you feel like it. The world has changed. Again and again. Men have walked on the moon. The Berlin Wall has fallen. Presidents you never expected have come and gone. The Cold War, which once felt like the sequel no one asked for, ended without a bang. You watched it all unfold on the evening news. Leaning forward in your chair, with your arms crossed and your mouth set in a line. You said things like, "Well, I'll be," and "I didn't think I'd live to see it." And then you refilled your coffee and kept watching. You're invited to a ceremony, another one. This time at the county courthouse. A new memorial. Clean granite. Bold lettering. Your name's not on it. But you recognize a few that are. You stand in the front row, holding your hat in both hands. The sun warming your shoulders. A teenager in a junior ROTC uniform reads a poem. His voice cracks halfway through. No one laughs. Afterwards, people want to shake your hand. You oublie. You listen to stories from folks who never wore a uniform, but lost someone who did. A woman tells you about her uncle who went missing in the Ardennes. A man in a baseball cap explains how his father never spoke about the war. You nod. You understand? One reporter asks for a quote. Something for the Sunday edition. She says, you think a moment. Then reply, I fought so my kids wouldn't have to. That's enough. She writes it down carefully. Back home, you sit with your scrapbook. The binding is cracked. The page is brittle. Photos. Newspaper clippings. Unipatch. A pressed flower from somewhere in France. You linger on a picture of yourself. 21 and cocky. Arms slung around a buddy's shoulder. Neither of you is smiling quite right. You stare for a long time. Then close the book. Your wife brings you soup something with barley and carrots and way too much pepper. You grin and say it tastes like rations with flair. She rolls her eyes, but her lips twitch upward. You've been through more together than most people do in 5 lifetimes. You don't need grand gestures. Just 2 chairs facing the same direction. On Sunday, the grandkids visit. They crash through the front door with muddy shoes and tangled hair, shouting your name like you're a superhero. You pretend to be grumpy about it. You're not. One asks if they can try on your old helmet. Another wants to see your medals. You let them. You sit on the rug and tell stories you've told 100 times. But somehow, they're new again. Funny. Wide-eyed. Full of wonder. They laugh when you describe eating cold beans in a foxhole or using a helmet to shave. You skip the part about the silence that followed the shelling. Some things. They'll learn in their own timer. Not at all. And that's okay. After they leave, the house is quiet again. You tidy the living room. Straighten a picture frame. Notice a photo on the mantel your whole family lined up at the last reunion. Generations. Colors. Heights. All of them smiling. All of them here. You fought for something. And here it is. Breathing. Arguing over who gets the last cookie. Making dumb jokes. Asking good questions. You walk out to the mailbox with slow, careful steps. There's a letter from a museum, a new exhibit on World War II. And would you consider loaning a few personal items? You write back, agreeing to send your field journal and that photo of your squad in Normandy. You pack them carefully, layering tissue paper over history. You visit the exhibit a few months later. It's strange. Seeing your belongings behind glass. A kid reads your name aloud and says, "Whoa, Grandpa." Look, you stand behind them. Smiling quietly. You don't correct them. You just stand still for a minute. Letting memory and presence blend into something softer. Outside. It starts to rain. Light. Cool. Not unpleasant. You sit under a tree, letting the drops gather on your coat. You remember rain in Belgium, in Italy, on the deck of a ship somewhere near Okinawa. You think about all the places you saw the sky cry. And yether you are, still watching, still remembering, still here. There's a chill in the air now, autumn, creeping in with its slow rustle of dry leaves and the faint scent of distant chimney smoke. You stand on your porch in the morning, wrapped in your old army jacket, the one with a rip in the lining and a smell you've never quite been able to wash out. It still fits. Mostly, you tug it tighter around your chest and sip your coffee as the sky lightens. A soft watercolor blend of amber and gray. You've gotten used to these quiet mornings, watching the squirrels argue over acorns and the mailman wave from his little white truck. Peace has become your new routine. But it's never mindless. Not after what you saw. Every moment of calm is a kind of miracle you don't take for granted. You read the paper. Of course, there's another war overseas, Vietnam this time. You've stopped trying to keep track of which hills belong to whom. Which lines are being drawn and redrawn across jungle maps. You've lived long enough to know that peace is always temporary. And history always repeats with just enough variation to keep things interesting. Or tragic. People ask what you think of the new war. Is it like your war? They say. You pose. In some ways, yes. In many ways, no. Different jungle. You usually reply. But the same blood. That tends to end the conversation. And you're fine with that. You've taken to writing a little. Not much. And not for anyone else, just a few notes here and there in a weathered notebook. You sit at your desk in the late afternoon, fingers curled around a pencil, scribbling thoughts like, "We came back to a world that didn't know how to ask what we'd seen." Or, "Victory is a complicated word." Sometimes your wife peeks over your shoulder. "You're going to publish those someday," she says. You snort. And spoil the mystery? She kisses your temple and walks away, leaving a trail of perfume and memory in her wake. You volunteer at the library, now mostly shelving books, sometimes helping kids find their next favorite. One day, a boy checks out a picture book on day. You help him pronounce Normandy, and he asks if it was scary. You look at the illustration cartoonish soldiers and neat little bunker sands, say, "A little scarier than that." Yeah. He smiles and thanks you. You smile too. You attend a reunion. Not military. This time your high school class. Held in a community center, decked out with crepe paper and old swing tunes playing softly from a cassette player. You sit across from someone you haven't seen since before Pearl Harbor. He's lost more hair, gained more stories. You talk about baseball, about the town changing, about how gas used to cost 13 cents. You dance once with your wife, slow and gentle, ignoring the arthritis in your knees. Back home, you look through a stack of letters you sent during the war, kept neatly in a shoebox your wife never threw out. You read your own words like they belong to someone else. Scared. Sarcastic. Trying to sound braver than you felt. You pause over one that ends with, "Tell Dad I still don't like meatloaf." You chuckle. That hasn't changed. Later. You're invited to speak at a university. A World War II symposium. Filled with professors and eager students. You walk in, unsure of what to say. When it's your turn, you shuffle to the podium, clear your throat, and say, "War is loud." That's the part no one tells you. There's a long silence. Then scattered applause. You tell a few stories, some funny, some quiet, and then thank them for listening. On your way out, a student shakes your hand and says, "I didn't know history could feel like this." At home, you find yourself thinking more and more about the people who didn't come back. You remember their faces, their voices, their small habit show One guy always tied his boots the same way. Or how another slept with a letter tucked in his helmet. You think about how time has carried you forward, but left them behind. Preserved in memory like leaves, pressed in a book. Sometimes you visit the cemetery. Not always on holidays. Just when the sky feels right. You bring a flag. Maybe a bottle cap from a drink you once shared. Maybe nothing at all. You sit for a while and say their names softly. You tell them what the world looks like now. You tell them about your grandkids. You thank them. You don't expect answers. You just want them to know you remember. Back in the kitchen, you help your wife make dinner meatloaf. Naturally, you chop onions while she sings along to the radio. Off-key, but joyful. You set the table with practiced hands. You light a candle, not for ceremony, but for warmth. The kind that flickers but doesn't falter. That night, you sit in your chair by the fire, watching the flames curl and crackle. You hold a blanket over your knees, sip something warm, and close your eyes. For a moment, the sounds are distant gunfire, or waves crashing on a beach, or boots marching in rhythm. Then they fade, and all you hear is home. The calendar tells you it's another year gone by. You believe it because the mail keeps coming, and your bones keep cracking louder when you stand up. You check the date. The 6th of June. Than nod. You remember this one without help. Day. Normandy. The beach that tried to swallow you. You light a candle at breakfast. Not out of ritual, but instinct. Then butter your toast and eat in silence, chewing through the weight of memory. Later, you take a walk to the town green. The flag's at full mast now. But you remember when it wasn't. There's a new plaque by the War Memorial. Something about community donors and bronze refurbishing. You smile faintly. Even memory needs maintenance. You sit on the bench under the elm tree. One you planted with the VFW boys 2 decades ago. Its roots stretch deep now. You think about that. How some things survive by going downward before they reach up. How maybe you did the same. Kids on bikes zip past, their laughter rising into the warm summer air. One of them, no older than 9, wears a plastic helmet painted like camouflage. He salutes you as he passes. You return it, your hand trembling slightly. He doesn't notice. You decide to write a letter to your great-grandchildren this time. You're not sure they'll read it soon. Maybe not until they're older. When curiosity catches up with bloodlines, you write about the war. Yes, but more about what came after. The value of keeping your promises, of showing up when it's hard, of listening more than speaking. You fold it neatly, write their names on the envelope, and put it in the drawer with the ribbon from the state fair and that photo from Tokyo. One evening, your wife finds you in the garage again. You're organizing the shelves, not because they need it, but because sorting screws and nails still feels like a kind of prayer. She leans in the doorway, arms folded. You thinking about them again? She asks. You don't answer. Just hold up a bent dog tag. You forgot you had. She crosses the room, wraps her arms around you. You stand like that for a while. The VA calls to invite you to a video interview part of a veteran's archive. We want your story in your own words. They say. You agree. You show up in your nicest flannel shirt. Comb your thinning hair. and sit in a folding chair beneath hot lights. They ask you about boot camp, about the landings, about how you coped when you got home. You talk for over an hour, stopping only to sip water and clear your throat. "Is there anything else you'd like to say?" the interviewer asks at the end. You pose. You think of the boy who sang in the foxhole, the man who couldn't stop shaking in the dark, the nurse who held your arm when you couldn't feel your fingers. You think of all the names, all the silences. Then you say, "I did my best. We all did." Oh, they thank you. And you walk out into the sunlight, blinking against the sudden warmth. You sit in your truck for a while before starting it, just letting the moment settle. That weekend, there's a community picnic, burgers on the grill, flags in the grass. A local band playing Glenn Miller covers with high school enthusiasm. You sit with your grandkids on a blanket, passing potato chips and pointing out clouds that look like battleships. One asks, "Were you in the war?" You nod. "Did you win?" Another asks. You chuckle softly. "I came home. That's what matters." Hi. Back at the house, you bring down the old photo albums. Not just war pictures, family reunions, birthdays. That one time you tried to build a canoe and almost sank it in the neighbor's pond. You flip through the pages slowly, smiling. You find a picture of yourself in uniform, standing stiff in front of a train station. You show it to your youngest great-grandchild. "That was me. Before I knew anything about the world." They squint. "You look so serious." "Oh, war makes you serious." You say. They think for a moment, then say, "I hope I never have to go." "Oh." You nod. "Me too." "Oh." That night, you sit on the porch with your wife, watching the fireflies blink across the yard. You hold hands, something you do without even noticing now. The air is thick with the scent of lilacs and warm earth. The moon rises slowly, casting silver shadows over the lawn. You say, "We've had a good life." "Oh," she smiles. "We earned it." You listen to the wind in the trees, the distant sound of a car on gravel, the rhythmic creak of your rocking chair. You've lived through fire and steel. And now, you've lived long enough to enjoy the slow hush of twilight, and it's enough. It is finally, gloriously, enough. You wake before dawn now, not because of bad dreams, but because your body has simply learned to meet the day early. You rise slowly, careful of the knees, careful of the creaks in the floorboards that have started to match your own. The house is dark but familiar, every corner lit by memory rather than bulbs. You don't need a light to find the kettle, to tap the cupboard for your favorite mug, the one from the USO fundraiser in 47. The morning radio clicks on, with a soft, crackle classical music today. No headlines yet. You sit at the table and listen to the gentle rise and fall of the strings, eyes closed, tea warming your hands. Once, this sound might have reminded you of the strings aboard transport ships, when someone would pull out a battered violin and play just to keep the silence at bay. Now, it's just music, and that's a kind of peace. Your doctor says you're in remarkably good shape for your age. And you chuckled at that last week. Remarkably good just means hasn't tipped over yet. You think. Still. You walk every day. Down the lane. Around the block. Past the schoolyard where kids hang from monkey bars and shout nonsense at full volume. You nod to the crossing guard. She waves with the same bright smile each time. Along your route is a neighbor's fence, with a small flag poked into the corner of the lawn. On Veterans Day, they added a sign that said, "Thank you for your service." You don't mind it, but you also don't dwell on it. That war is still a room you visit only when you choose, not when someone knocks. You've started writing more, not with any goal, just to uncoil the stories that have lived inside you so long. Some come out neat, just a paragraph, a joke, a single image. Others stretch across several pages, looping through memory with no clear end. One is about the time your unit commandeered a French bakery for half a day and baked bread just to feel normal. Another is about a man who never said a word the whole march through Italy, but cried when he saw snow in the Alps. You don't plan to publish these, but you leave them where someone might find them someday, tucked between books or behind photographs. The photo albums have expanded now, not just black and white shots of foxholes and helmets, but color pictures family, birthdays, beach trips. You've watched your great-grandchildren grow from wide-eyed toddlers to awkward teenagers, taller than you, before you could blink. One of them brings home a school assignment on World War II and asks, "Can I interview you for extra credit?" You smile and say, "Only if I get some pie out of it." Hell, she asks the usual questions. But this time you go deeper. You talk about fear and loyalty, about exhaustion and friendship. You talk about the man next to you who was always first to volunteer for watch duty because he couldn't sleep anyway. You talk about the sound of boots squelching in soaked trenches, about the hot tin taste of canned meat, and the moment you first saw the ocean again after the war. It looked bluer than it ever had. You say, like it had been holding its breath. 2. You cry a little as you tell it. You don't apologize. Neither does she. At church, they ask for volunteers to visit the homebound, and you sign up. You're the oldest volunteer by far, which they find funny at first, until they see how easily people talk to you. Other veterans, mostly men who haven't told their stories in decades. You sit at their bedsides, sometimes saying nothing, sometimes sharing half sentences that don't need finishing. You both understand. One man tells you he still dreams in black and white. Another asks if you remember a corporal named Jessup who played harmonica in the Ardennes. You nod. Surprised. Tall guy with a crooked front tooth? The man grins. That's him. Good to know. I didn't dream him up. Oh, you begin to understand that you're part of a tapestry now, not just of war, but of witness. You're someone people turn to not for history lessons, but for reminders that people endured, that they made it home, that they built something afterward. Sometimes, after a visit, you sit in your car and write their names in your notebook, just to keep them close. At home, you and your wife go through the attic. It's time, she says. Time to clean out the past. You find boxes of things you'd forgotten: ration stamps, a medal you never liked, a pressed rose from your wedding day. You hold each item gently, as though it might dissolve. You laugh over old sweaters. You pose over telegrams. You pack some away and let others go. You find a letter in your own handwriting you never mailed, addressed to your mother, dated 1943. It says, "I don't know how to explain what it's like here. Just know I love you, and I'm trying to come back in one piece." You fold it and slip it into your wallet. Some things still matter. Even now, there's a new family down the road, young couple. Baby, just born. You bake banana bread and bring it over. Out of habit, as much as neighborliness. The father notices your cap with the 101st patch and says, "My grandfather served. Never really talked about it." You nod and say, "That makes two of us." End of That night, you sit on the porch with your wife. The stars are bright, scattered like pieces of memory across the velvet sky. She says, "Do you ever feel like we've had too much time? You think about that?" Shake your head. "No. I think we've had just enough to remember it all." You close your eyes. The night air is cool, but not cold. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots. And for a little while longer, the world is still. Your doctor says it's time to slow down. You chuckle softly and say, "Doc, I've been slowing down for 20 years. I'm practically standing still." He laughs, but gently puts a hand on your shoulder. "Just take it easy," he says. "Listen to your body." So, you do. You sit more. You nap when you need to. You let others carry the heavier things, groceries, ladders, memories. You don't mind. In fact, it's a kind of grace, letting the world move around you instead of through you. Still, your mind doesn't slow. If anything, it sharpens at odd hours. At night, lying beneath the creak of your ceiling fan, you remember things you didn't even know were still tucked away. The smell of burnt motor oil, the heat of a rifle barrel after firing too long, the way silence fell after a battle, thick and almost too loud. You remember? And then you let it go. You don't carry it all anymore. Just pieces. The ones that matter. There's a new exhibit opening at the State Museum, Voices of Valor. Your granddaughter helped curate it. She invited you. Of course. Said she used some of your stories and even one of your journal entries. You weren't sure if you wanted to go at first. But curiosity, as it always does, got the better of you. So you put on your best shirt, the one that still buttons all the way up, and your cleanest shoes. You polish your glasses. Your wife helps you with your tie. You take the trip slowly, hands folded in your lap during the ride, watching towns drift by through the window like slow-moving photographs. The museum is bright and modern. Wide glass windows, smooth tile floors. You step through the main doors and feel the rush of air conditioning and faint scent of varnished wood. A young guide smiles at you with eyes that look too young to know what they're honoring. But it's all right. That's how it's supposed to be. Inside the exhibit, your granddaughter beams. "I saved the best part for last," she says, guiding you through displays of uniforms, ration kits, black and white photos. There's your squad photo, tucked beside a typed version of one of your letters home. Your handwriting, replicated exactly. You said people needed something warm they could hold in the cold. She says, I thought that said everything. Oh, you clear your throat. Unsure what to say, you nod. It's perfect. Other visitors walk past. Reading. Pausing. Nodding. One older man stops at your photo and whispers, I knew a guy like him. He doesn't know it's you. And that feels right too. Back at home. You sit on the porch again. The air is humid now. Summer thickening around your shoulders. You listen to the chirp of cicadas and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. You think about how many summers you've had, how many you never expected to see. Your great-grandson brings you lemonade. A little too tart. You pretend not to notice. He sits beside you. Long legs spilling over the porch steps. What was it like? The very end, he asks. Of the war. I mean, you watch a firefly blink above the lawn before you answer. It was quiet. You say, strangely quiet, like the world had stopped holding its breath and didn't know what to do next. He nods slowly, like he understands. Later, after the kids have gone and the house is still, you sort through your old trunk again. This time, you set things Ascidian, armband, a medal, a torn field guide, things you want passed on. But not just as artifacts. You write a note for each. He wore this when he was scared but kept walking anyway. She gave this to me the day we left, and I kept it until the day we came home. This meant nothing to anyone at the time, but I kept it because I wanted to remember what it felt like to be human. You seal the notes in envelopes and tuck them under each item. Not for display. Not for applause. Just for memory. You and your wife go to the lake, one last time that summer. The same cabin you've been renting off and on for 50 years. The dock groans a little more now, but the breeze still carries that scent of water and pine and possibility. You sit on the porch in silence, side by side, watching the ripples move gently across the water. She squeezes your hand. You squeeze back as the sun dips behind the trees. You think about that first time back from the war when this lake felt impossibly still, like the earth had exhaled, and finally, so had you. And now, here it is again, full circle. You light a fire in the stone ring out front. Just a small one. Enough to crackle. Enough to warm your feet. The stars begin to blink overhead. You don't say much. You don't need to, because sometimes survival isn't about the loudest moments. Sometimes it's about who you become in the silence that follows, and in this silence, you are whole. The mornings are colder now, edged with that brittle kind of chill that clings to your knuckles even after you've come inside. Fall has turned the trees to flames-blazing reds, glowing yellows, and browns so deep they almost seem burnt. You rake leaves in small stretches, stopping to stretch your back and laugh softly at yourself. You used to run across Europe with 40 pounds of gear. Now, 2 armfuls of oak leaves have you reaching for a heating pad. But you're not annoyed. Not really. There's something peaceful about slowing down in sync with the season. The whole world seems to be winding down gently, like a song easing toward its final chord. You spend more time indoors, wrapped in a flannel blanket in your reading chair. Sometimes you drift off with a book half finished, the page folded where your thumb gave up the fight. You dream softer, now less war. More family. Sometimes it's just walking down a long road with your wife beside you. Hands clasped. Sun on your shoulders. The kind of dream that feels more like memory. The local school invites you for Veterans Day again. You nearly say no this time traveling. Crowds. Microphone feedback. But your wife raises an eyebrow and says, "You'll feel better once you're there." So you put on your jacket with the pins still in place? Polish your shoes. And let her tuck a handkerchief into your breast pocket like always. You walk into the auditorium with your cane, tapping out your rhythm. And the students stand. It catches you off guard every time. That rustling chorus of respect. You nod and smile, humbled in a way that never quite fades. You're part of a panel now, just 3 of you left from the old war, joined by younger veterans from later ones. A man from Iraq. A woman from Afghanistan. You sit together backstage beforehand, sipping lukewarm coffee and sharing the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. When it's your turn, you keep it short. You talk about the mud, about the waiting, about how victory didn't look like a parade but like someone making you laugh when you hadn't in days. You talk about how you carried a picture of your wife in your helmet liner because it made the world feel smaller, safer. You pause and add, "And because she reminded me what I was fighting to get back to." Afterward, a girl from the audience hands you a drawing. She made your name in block letters beneath a soldier in silhouette, surrounded by stars. You thank her, choking up just a little. You've seen too much to believe in perfect symbols, but something about the way she smiles makes you think they matter anyway. You visit your friend in the care home on the edge of town, Pete, the last from your company still living close by. He's slower now, wheelchair-bound, but his wit's as sharp as ever. You bring him his favorite candy, black licorice, and he groans in mock despair. "You trying to kill me faster?" he jokes. You grin. "If I were, I'd bring your ex-wife." Huh. You sit and talk for hours. About everything. About nothing. You hold his hand as he drifts off. And before you leave, do you place that crumpled squad photo on the table beside his bed? In case you forget where you came from. You whisper. You find yourself sorting through your will next. It's not morbid, it's responsible. You label boxes for the kids. For the grandkids, you attach sticky notes with stories. This watch was with me in Belgium, still ticks when the power's out. This old book belonged to a medic named Roy, never went anywhere without it. This lighter, traded it for chocolate in a train yard in 45. Long story. You leave a sealed envelope for your wife. You don't tell her what's inside. She'll know when to open it. One afternoon, your great-grandson brings his girlfriend to visit. She's shy, polite, the kind of nervous that makes her talk a little too fast. You like her immediately. You sit at the kitchen table with them, sipping tea and listening to their plan school. Careers. Maybe traveling after graduation. You nod, smile, and offer one piece of advice. Go. While your knees still work. Oh. They laugh. But you mean it? The sun dips earlier each day now. You find yourself watching the sky more, especially in those last orange minutes before twilight. You used to count minutes of daylight during the war, marking shifts and watches by the slow spin of the sun. Now you count them as gifts. Small, golden, unasked, for blessings. You write more of your memories down, little things. The name of the dog that followed your unit for 3 weeks. The French kid who traded you buttons for chewing gum. The soldier who carried a broken guitar for the entire march from Naples to Rome, even though he couldn't play a note. You fill page after page with these fragments. Not because you think they'll change the world, but because they're real. And real things deserve to be remembered. One night, you sit with your wife, watching an old black and white film. It's set in the war. Of course, Hollywood's version, with orchestral swells and noble stares and no mud at all. You snort softly, and she squeezes your hand. At least it ends well, she says. You nod. You hope that's true. For all of it. When the credits roll, you don't move for a long time. You just sit there. The light from the screen flickering across your lined face. And let the quiet hold you, and in that stillness, you feel it. Not the war, not the pain. Just the soft hush of a life well lived. The days are shorter now, and the mornings darker. You wake before the sun, with your joints already narrating the weather. Still, you read slowly, thoughtfully, grateful for every click and ache. You stretch, sigh, and shuffle to the kitchen. The kettle takes its time, so you watch its steam curl into the air. Like smoke signals from some long-forgotten camp, you sip your tea at the table, your fingers curled around the warm mug, and look out the window at the frost painting the edges of the glass. Another winter approaches. Another season you weren't promised. You smile to yourself. How many men, you wonder, counted their future in days and never expected decades? You spend the morning writing thank you letters. One, to the young teacher who had her students send you hand-drawn cards after your Veterans Day talk. Another to the museum curator who returned your borrowed items with a handwritten note of her own. Your stories added life to our walls. That one made you tear up a little. You reply. The walls held them safely. That's all any of us could ask. Huh. You've come to value those kinds of exchanges, quiet. Sincere. Lasting. You no longer feel the need to win arguments or correct people's misremembered facts. You let things be. You've learned that wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing when to speak and when to hold silence like a precious thing. You take another walk to the park. This time bundled against the cold. The wind tugs at your collar. A little girl points at your cap and asks her mother what it means. The mother kneels, explaining softly. You smile as you pass, grateful she didn't brush it off with a just an old man's hat. Memory lives in symbols. After all, the town has changed again. There's a new coffee shop where the old pharmacy used to be. They serve drinks with names you can't pronounce and muffins that look like art projects. You go in anyway. Curious. The young barista gives you a veteran's discount and throws in a cookie for free. Thanks for what you did, he says. You nod and say, thanks for what you're doing. He looks confused, then touched. It's a good trade. Back home, you reread letters your wife saved in a shoebox, the ones you wrote during the war. You marvel at how young your voice sounds. How certain. I'll be back by Christmas. One says, you didn't make it that year, or the next. But somehow, you both kept writing. And that was its own kind of faith. Your wife joins you in the living room later. 2 mugs of cocoa in hand. She settles beside you, her head resting on your shoulder. You sit together, in a silence born of decades. No need for conversation. Just warmth. Just presence. "I'm glad you came home," she whispers. You don't reply. You just kiss the top of her head and hold her a little tighter. There's a letter from a historian on your desk. He's working on a book about your division and wants to know if you'd review a draft. You agree, pencil in hand, and spend an afternoon scribbling notes. You cross out one dramatic flourish and write, "It wasn't glory. It was grit." Another section claims your unit feared nothing. You underline it and write, "We feared plenty. We just kept moving." You send it back with a short note. History is better when it's honest. That's how people learn. Oh, you've started donating some of your items little by little. Not all at once. You keep the things closest to your heart. But your uniform now rests in a glass case at the community center. Your helmet, the dent still visible, went to the school's history club. Your field journal, surprisingly, was requested by the Smithsonian. You packed it carefully, wrapped in linen and tied with a bit of twine, because some things deserve reverence, even if they smell like old pencil shavings. That night, your granddaughter calls. She's applying for graduate school, wants to study military history, because of you, she says. You smile so hard your cheeks ache. You tell her. Make sure you tell the truth, even the parts that aren't clean. She promises she will. You believe her. Later, you find yourself back on the porch, wrapped in a heavy blanket, watching frost creep across the lawn. You think about the war knot as a movie or a textbook, but as a series of moments, a foot slipping in the mud, the sound of a harmonica in the dark, a letter folded 3 times in a breast pocket, a handshake goodbye that turned into a memory no one else could ever share. Historians still argue about strategy, about generals, about turning points and missed opportunities. But you remember the little things. The hot coffee after a cold night. The laughter that came too loud because it needed to. The odd comfort of someone snoring nearby. Just loud enough to remind you weren't alone. You close your eyes. The stars spin slowly above, and for once, everything is still. Your days are quiet now, marked by the soft rituals of a life well worn. You wake slowly, stretch carefully, and move through the house like a caretaker of memories. The kettle whistles. The light drips in through the curtains. Your chair by the window waits, just as it did yesterday, and the day before that, and the one before that. You sit with your tea, the mug warm in your hands, and watch the frost burn off the grass. Time seems to move differently these days, like a clock, and more like the tide. It comes in, it goes out. Some days faster, some slower, but always moving forward, gently insisting you no longer fill every hour. You don't need to. Your calendar is simple. A doctor's appointment here, a family visit there, the occasional community event if you're feeling spry. The pressure to do has long since given way to the pleasure of being. You're not chasing anymore. You're arriving, over and over again, wherever you are. The grandkids visit more often now. They seem to know, without being told, that your time is precious. They don't rush when they're with you. They sit longer, They ask deeper questions. They bring their own children and let them climb into your lap. Tug on your fingers. Marvel at your stories, like you're some magical relic from a time they can't quite imagine. One of them asks, "Did you really fight in a war?" And you say, "Yes, I did." Their eyes go wide. "Was it scary?" You nod. "Yes, but so was coming home and having to learn how to live again." They don't quite understand, but they nod back, as if they know enough for now. You keep a journal on the nightstand half full. Pages spent. You write in it when something small strikes you. A breeze that smells like rain. A memory you haven't thought of in decades. The way your wife still laughs at your dumbest jokes. You write, "We survived more than bullets. We survived the long quiet that came after hast." Your wife's hair has gone silver, fine as thread. And you love her even more now than when she was 23 and dancing barefoot in the kitchen. She brings you soup on cold days, helps you with your sweater, and holds your hand while you nap. Sometimes, she reads aloud from your letters. And even though you know the words by heart, you listen like it's the first time. Your photo hangs in the hallway now, in a neat frame with a bronze nameplate beneath. You used to shy away from displays like that. Now, you just nod when you pass it, like greeting an old friend who once knew a different version of you. The VA sends a form in the mail, something about burial preferences. You fill it out with a steady hand. Check the boxes. Write your full name clearly. You choose the flag, the military honors, the quiet little corner of the cemetery next to Pete. When you're done, you place it in the file labeled, "When the time comes." You don't mention it to the kids. They'll find it when they need to. You and your wife visit that plot sometimes. There's no headstone yet, just grass and a tree that's grown taller each year. You sit on the bench beside it, the breeze rustling the branches above. It's not morbid. You tell people? It's just planning ahead. You've made your peace with leaving. You've done what you came to do. You loved fiercely, laughed often, fought hard, and forgave slowly. You didn't come home whole, but you came home, and you built a life worth the damage. Now, in the gentle hush of your last season, you move a little slower, speak a little softer, and love a little deeper. You tell your stories, not because you need to relive them, but because someone else might need to hear them. And one night, without ceremony, you go to bed early. The room is dark, warm, still. You feel your wife's hand in yours. You close your eyes. You think of the beach, the sound of the surf, the smell of salt and diesel and hope. And then, nothing hurts. Nothing chases. Nothing waits. Just rest. Just peace. And now, as we leave behind the long shadows of history and the fading footprints of those who walked the hardest paths, let yourself drift into stillness. There's no more marching. No more waiting for orders. The battles are over. The letters have been sent. The uniforms folded and put away. The world keeps spinning. Yes, but tonight, it spins gently, slowly, as though it, too, has grown tired and settled into its own quiet rhythm. You've walked through fire. You've sat in foxholes. You've waited out storms with only a blanket and hope. And through it all, you held on not because it was easy, but because you believed in something more, in home, in peace, in the soft warmth of another sunrise. Now, you lay safe, wrapped in layers of memory and sleep. The sounds of distant waves lap at the edge of your mind. Somewhere, a harmonica plays softly in the dark. Laughter drifts from a campfire. A train whistles far, far away. Let your shoulders sink into the mattress. Let the weight go. You are no longer a soldier. You are a story, a breath, a name whispered with reverence by those who came after. Your war is over. The world is quiet. You are home. Sleep well. Hero, sleep deeply. You made it. Sweet dreams.